I still remember the exact moment my world shattered. Not when Marquis called off our wedding. That came later. No, it was when I heard Rosalie's voicemail, accidentally forwarded to me by a mutual friend. She was never good enough for our family anyway. Now Marquis can find someone worthy of the young name. My name is Vanessa, and 5 years ago I was 3 days away from what should have been the happiest day of my life. I was in our apartment, surrounded by wedding favours I'd handcrafted, little copper lanterns with our initials entwined. The phone rang. Marquis' voice was hollow, mechanical. "We need to talk. Now." He showed up at our door 20 minutes later, clutching an envelope. His hands were shaking. "Tell me these aren't real," he said, spreading photos across our kitchen counter. Photos of me, apparently in compromising positions with his best man. Photos that were masterfully edited, but completely fake. "This is insane," I said, grabbing the photos. "You know me. You know I would never—" "Stop lying!" He slammed his fist on the counter, making me jump. "Rosalie found these. She hired someone to follow you because she was suspicious." Of course it was Rosalie, his perfect sister, who'd spent 3 years making subtle digs about my humble background, my marketing degree from a state school, my lack of social connections. "Call the photographer," I begged. "Check the metadata. These are fake, Marquis. Your sister—" "Don't blame Rosalie. She's looking out for me." He wouldn't meet my eyes. "The wedding's off. I'll handle the announcements. You're choosing to believe this? After 4 years together?" Silence. Then, "I'll send someone for my things." He left me standing there, surrounded by copper lanterns and shattered dreams. 200 guests to uninvite, a honeymoon to cancel, a life to unravel. The next day, Tamara showed up with wine and determination. "We're going to get through this," she said, helping me box up wedding decorations. "And then we're going to make them regret ever messing with you." I was crying into a champagne flute when my phone buzzed. Another accidental forward, this time a group text where Rosalie was gloating about her successful intervention. The photos worked perfectly. He didn't even question them. Can you believe she thought she could marry into our family? Tamara grabbed my phone. "This is evidence. We can expose them." "No," I said, something cold and hard crystallizing in my chest. "Not yet. I spent the next 5 years building, learning, growing." Tamara and I launched our marketing firm, specializing in brand rehabilitation and crisis management. We became the go-to agency for companies needing a phoenix rise from the ashes. Our success was meteoric, but I kept my name out of the press, stayed invisible. "You're playing the long game," Tamara said one day, watching me decline another magazine profile. "Waiting for something," I smiled. "Good things come to those who wait." Then this morning, an email landed in my inbox. From myprimewellness@gmail.com. Subject: urgent meeting request. Brand consultation. "Dear Ms. Burns, our wellness company is facing significant challenges and requires immediate brand rehabilitation. Your firm's reputation for turning around struggling businesses is exactly what we need. We're prepared to offer equity for your services. Sincerely, Marquis Young and Rosalie Young co-founders, My Prime Wellness." I stared at the screen. 5 years of patience suddenly crystallizing into perfect opportunity. They had no idea who I was now. No idea that the woman they'd humiliated had become the expert they desperately needed. Tamara burst into my office, waving her phone. "Did you see? They're reaching out to us. This is—" "Perfect," I finished, already typing my response. "Schedule them for tomorrow, but don't let them know I'm involved. As far as they're concerned, they're meeting with an anonymous partner." "Vanessa!" Tamara's voice held a warning. "Are you sure about this?" I looked up at her, thinking of copper lanterns and faked photos and years of calculated patience. "They destroyed my wedding day," I said quietly. "Now I'm going to destroy everything they've built." I hit send on my reply, watching it whoosh away into cyberspace. Tomorrow, Marquis and Rosalie would walk into my office, not knowing they were walking into their own funeral, and I would be wearing my brightest smile to greet them. I spent an hour choosing my armour for the meeting. A charcoal Armani suit, blood-red stilettos, and the diamond earrings I'd once planned to wear at my wedding reception. My hair was longer now, styled differently. 5 years had sharpened my features, erased the soft girl they'd known. "Remember," Tamara said, adjusting my collar, "you're just another executive. Don't let them see I know how to play this." I checked my reflection one last time. Trust me. The conference room had glass walls. I could see them before they saw me. Marquis looked older, stress lines around his eyes. Rosalie was still perfectly put together, but there was something desperate in her posture. They were reviewing documents, heads bent close, whispering. I took a deep breath and pushed open the door. "Mr. and Ms. Young, I'm Vanessa Burns." The moment stretched like taffy. Rosalie's perfectly manicured hand froze mid-gesture. Marquis's face drained of colour. I kept my smile professional, pleasant. We... Marquis stumbled over his words. "We didn't realise that I owned this firm?" I settled into my chair, spreading their proposal before me. "Well, shall we discuss your situation?" Rosalie recovered first, her society mask sliding back into place. "This is unexpected. Perhaps we should reschedule with another firm? By all means." I started gathering the papers, though I doubt you'll find anyone else willing to take on a company hemorrhaging money like yours. Those influencer lawsuits are particularly nasty. "Wait," Marquis said quickly. "Please, we need help." I leaned back, studying them. "Tell me about your challenges." For the next hour, they laid out their disaster. Their wellness brand had expanded too quickly, alienated core customers, faced multiple accusations of false advertising. Their latest product line had flopped spectacularly. They needed a complete overhaul. "We're prepared to offer 15% equity," Rosalie said stiffly. I smiled. 40%. "That's insane," Rosalie's mask cracked. "We'd never..." 35% then, with a path to 51% based on performance metrics. I slid a contract across the table. Plus full creative control over rebranding efforts. Take it or watch your company die. Marquis reached for the contract. Rosalie grabbed his wrist. "We need to discuss this privately." "Of course," I stood. "You have until tomorrow morning. After that, my offer expires." I walked out, feeling their eyes on my back. In my office, Tamara was waiting. "Well, they'll take it." I kicked off my heels. Rosalie's pride won't let her watch their company fail, and Marquis was always weak when backed into a corner. "Did it feel good?" Tamara asked softly. "Seeing them squirm?" I thought about Marquis's pale face, Rosalie's barely contained rage. It felt like the beginning. The next morning, my assistant brought in a signed contract. Attached was a note in Marquis's familiar handwriting. "We appreciate this opportunity. We hope past circumstances won't affect our professional relationship." I laughed out loud. "Hope past circumstances won't affect things?" Oh, Marquis. Those circumstances were exactly why they were here. "Schedule a brand strategy meeting," I told my assistant, "and get me everything you can find on their partner, Mac Owens. Every detail. Should I include their personal histories in the research?" "No need." I smiled, touching the contract. I already know everything about the Youngs that matters. Later that night, Tamara brought takeout to my office. I was still there, planning. "You know what's crazy?" I said, pushing aside market research. 5 years ago, I thought Marquis was the love of my life. Now I barely felt anything looking at him. Just cold. "That's probably healthy," Tamara said, handing me chopsticks. "But are you sure about these terms? 51% is aggressive, but it's not destruction." I pulled up my Prime Wellness's financial records. "See these numbers? They're desperate enough to accept any help. But look closer. There's money missing. Large sums transferred to offshore accounts. Want to bet Rosalie's behind that?" "You think she's embezzling?" "I think," I said carefully, "that Rosalie's about to learn what happens when you give someone who hates you access to all your secrets." Tamara studied me for a long moment. "They walked into their own funeral wearing smiles, didn't they?" I raised my water glass in a mock toast. "To new beginnings and very, very satisfying endings." That night, I dreamed of copper lanterns and faked photos. But this time, in my dreams, I was the one smiling. The rebranding meeting was going exactly as I'd planned. I stood at the head of the conference table, presenting my strategy while Rosalie's face grew increasingly pinched. We need to pivot completely, I explained, clicking to the next slide. Abandon the luxury wellness market. Focus on mass market appeal. That's suicide, Rosalie snapped. Our entire brand is built on exclusivity. I raised an eyebrow. Your exclusive brand is failing, unless you prefer bankruptcy? Marquis leaned forward. I actually like it. Making our products more accessible could... Of course you like it, Rosalie cut him off. You always did prefer common things. The barb was aimed at me, but I kept my face neutral. Mr. Owens, what's your take? Mac, their silent partner, looked startled at being addressed. He was older than the others, with kind eyes and a worried frown. Well, the numbers don't lie. We need change. Excellent. I smiled. Marquis, why don't you and I work on the new messaging while Rosalie handles the financial transition? Mac, I'd love to get your input on distribution channels. Say, over coffee tomorrow? Rosalie's eyes narrowed at the divide and conquer strategy, but she couldn't object without seeming difficult. Perfect. After the meeting, Marquis lingered. Vanessa, about what happened? Let's keep things professional, I interrupted smoothly. The past is the past. Right, he shuffled his feet. It's just, you've done so well for yourself. I always knew you were capable of... Marquis. I met his eyes. Don't. He left and Tamara slipped in. Girl, you're ice cold. But did you see the way he was looking at you? Like he's remembering what he lost? I sorted through some papers. Good. Let him remember. It'll make things harder when Rosalie turns on him. Speaking of Rosalie, Tamara handed me a file. You need to see this. Found it while digging through their old contracts. I opened it and froze. There, dated 3 days before my cancelled wedding, was a contract amendment. Rosalie's signature was at the bottom, along with a notary stamp. The document placed a lien on my expected wedding gifts and dowry, money that had mysteriously disappeared after everything fell apart. That calculating bitch, I whispered. She planned everything, the photos, the money grab, all of it. There's more, Tamara said quietly. Look at the witness signatures. Marquis's name jumped out at me. He'd known. He'd signed off on his sister stealing from me before he even ended our engagement. My hands shook as I set down the paper. For a moment, I was back in our apartment, begging him to believe me, while he already knew the truth and chose his sister's scheme anyway. Vanessa! Tamara touched my arm. You okay? I'm perfect. I straightened my spine. Schedule that coffee with Mac for tomorrow, and move up the timeline on the rebranding launch. The next morning, I met Mac at a quiet cafe. He was nervous, fidgeting with his cup. Something's wrong with the company, he blurted out. Numbers don't add up. Rosalie blocks my access to certain accounts, and Marquis just lets her. I widened my eyes in fake concern. That must be frustrating, being kept in the dark by your partners. It's not right. He shook his head. I invested my retirement in this company. If something's happening, I could look into it, I offered carefully, quietly, but I'd need access to everything. Yes, he said quickly. Please, I trust you. Poor Mac. He really did trust me, almost made me feel bad about what was coming. Back at the office, Tamara was waiting with news. Rosalie's furious about the rebranding. She's been calling investors, trying to block it. Let her. I pulled up the new advertising mock-ups on my screen. In fact, let's give her something real to be angry about. The ads were deliberately provocative. Wellness products marketed with working-class imagery, prices slashed to bargain basement levels. Everything the brand used to mock, now embraced. Rosalie would hate it. Her elite friends would be horrified. This will tank their reputation in their old circles, Tamara observed. Yes, I agreed. And when Rosalie tries to fix it, she'll have to explain where all that missing money went. Money that, thanks to Mac's cooperation, I now have proof she stole. You're really going to destroy them, aren't you? I thought of that contract amendment, of Marquis's signature next to his sister's. They destroyed themselves, I said softly. I'm just making sure everyone sees it. My phone buzzed. A text from Marquis. Can we talk? About us? I deleted it without responding. There was no more us. There was only the slow, sweet satisfaction of watching them implode, piece by carefully orchestrated piece. I waited until late evening to confront Rosalie when the office was nearly empty. She was still at her desk, probably plotting how to salvage her precious brand. I placed the contract amendment in front of her without a word. "Where did you get this?" Her voice was ice. "Does it matter?" I sat across from her, phone recording in my pocket. "You stole my money that was meant for my new life with your brother." Rosalie leaned back, a smirk playing at her lips. "Prove it. That money was a business investment that failed. Nothing more. An investment you arranged 3 days before showing Marquis those fake photos? You never deserved him." She stood, circling her desk like a predator. "Some scholarship girl from nowhere, thinking she could marry into our family. The photos just sped up the inevitable. So you admit they were fake?" "Of course they were fake," she laughed. "And it was so easy. Marquis wanted to believe them. He needed an excuse to end things without looking like the coward he is." Got her. I kept my face neutral. "And the money?" "Insurance. Can't have the help walking away with family resources." She perched on her desk. "What's your point, Vanessa? This was years ago. No one will care now." I stood slowly. "I have access to your company's financials now, Rosalie. All of them, including those offshore accounts you've been funneling money into." The smirk faltered. "You're bluffing." "Am I? Mac's been very helpful. He's quite worried about his investment." "Get out of my office." Her voice shook slightly. "Gladly." I headed for the door, then paused. "Oh, and Rosalie, this is the end of you." Back in my office, I played the recording for Tamara. Her eyes widened at Rosalie's casual admission about the photos. "Holy shit," she whispered. "You got her?" "Not yet." I forwarded the recording to my secure email. "But soon. Did you find those emails I asked about?" Tamara handed me a folder. Marquis' emails from that week. He was asking questions about the photos' authenticity before he confronted you. Rosalie shut him down, but he knew there was a chance they were fake. I scanned the emails, my chest tight. He chose to believe them anyway. "What's our next move?" I pulled up the new ad campaign we'd created under Rosalie's authorization, the one that would destroy their luxury brand image. "Launch it. Tonight." "Are you sure? This will do it." The ads went live at midnight. By morning, social media was exploding. My Prime Wellness, once the epitome of exclusive wellness culture, was being mocked for its desperate rebrand. Their elite clientele was fleeing in droves. Marquis burst into my office without knocking. "What have you done?" "Implemented our agreed-upon strategy." I didn't look up from my computer. "Problem? Our core customers are leaving. The influencers are posting about betrayal. Rosalie approved every decision." I finally met his eyes. "Just like you approved her stealing my money before our wedding." He paled. "How did you—" "Get out of my office, Marquis. Go comfort your sister. It's what you do best." After he left, I pulled up my email. An anonymous account I'd created was ready. One click would send Rosalie's recorded confession to an industry gossip blog that lived for this kind of drama. My finger hovered over the mouse. In my head, I heard her voice again. The photos just sped up the inevitable. Click. By afternoon, the recording was everywhere. My Prime scandal was trending. Clients were publicly cutting ties. Rosalie wasn't answering her phone. Mac appeared in my doorway, ashen-faced. "Did you know about all of this?" I knew they weren't who they pretended to be. I gestured for him to sit. "The question is, what are you going to do about it? I can't stay associated with them." He slumped in the chair. "My reputation? I might have a solution." I slid a new contract across the desk. "One that protects your investment and distances you from the Youngs." As he read, my phone lit up with a text from Marquis. "Wasn't I never good enough?" I smiled, remembering Rosalie's words from that long-ago voicemail. The symmetry was poetic. Tamara brought me coffee and a local business magazine. The headline read, "My Prime Wellness, from luxury to liability." "You know they can't recover from this," she said quietly. "That's the point." I took a sip of coffee. Rosalie spent years building her perfect image. Now everyone knows who she really is. And Marquis, I thought of his desperate text, his pale face, the way he'd chosen his sister's lies over our love. Marquis is exactly who he's always been, a coward hiding behind his sister's strength. Now he can hide behind her disgrace too. The sun was setting over the city, painting the sky the colour of revenge. The marketing disaster was even better than I'd planned. The controversial ad campaign, approved under Rosalie's signature, showed their luxury wellness products being used by construction workers and fast food employees. The tagline, "Wellness for the masses," made their elite customers recoil in horror. Our stock is down 40%, Mac reported during our emergency board meeting. Major retailers are pulling our products. Rosalie slammed her hand on the table. Because someone, she glared at me, deliberately destroyed our brand identity. I followed the strategy you approved, I replied calmly. Perhaps you should have read the documents more carefully before signing them. You manipulative bit. Rosalie, Marquis cut her off. Please, Vanessa, there must be something we can do. I pretended to consider. We could try damage control, but first, we need to address the recording. The room went silent. The leaked audio of Rosalie admitting to faking the photos had gone viral overnight. Industry blogs were having a field day with the scandal. That recording was obtained illegally, Rosalie hissed. Actually, I pulled out a document. New York is a one-party consent state, and as your contracted business partner, I had every right to record our conversation about company finances. Mac leaned forward. What finances? Oh, didn't you know? I projected some bank statements onto the screen. About the offshore accounts? The missing investor funds? Rosalie's face went white. Marquis looked like he might throw up. You set us up, Rosalie whispered. No, Rosalie. You set yourself up. I just made sure everyone saw it. My phone buzzed. A text from Tamara. Press is gathering in the lobby. They want statements about the scandal. Perfect timing. Well, I stood, gathering my papers. I believe we have some journalists to speak with. Shall we? Wait, Marquis grabbed my arm. Please, we can fix this. Together, like we used to fix things. I looked at his hand until he released me. We never fixed anything, Marquis. You just hid your sister's lies, and now everyone knows. The press conference was a disaster. Rosalie tried to spin the recording as a misunderstanding. Marquis stammered through non-answers. Mac looked shell-shocked. I watched from the back as reporters fired questions. Is it true you fabricated evidence to break up your brother's engagement? Can you comment on the missing investor funds? Will you be stepping down from the company? Afterward, Rosalie cornered me in the hallway. You think you've won? I'll sue you for everything you have. Try it. I smiled. My lawyers would love to depose you about those offshore accounts. And that contract amendment you used to steal my dowry? That's fraud, Rosalie. Prison time fraud. You're just like me, she spat. Calculating, cold. No, I stepped closer. I'm what you made me, and I'm better at it than you ever were. Back in my office, Tamara was watching the press conference footage go viral. Stock's down another 20%. Board members are calling for Rosalie's resignation. And Mac? Called his lawyer. He's looking to partner with us instead. I nodded, satisfied. Start the paperwork. My phone lit up with messages from Marquis. Please talk to me. I'm sorry about everything. I should have believed you. I never stopped loving you. Delete, 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 delete. Tamara watched me. You okay? Better than okay. I pulled up the company ownership documents. Thanks to their desperate grab for help, I now own 51% of their company, controlling interest. So what's next? I thought about Rosalie's face when the recording played, about Marquis' pathetic texts, about 5 years of planning. Now, I said, we finish it. Call the board. Emergency meeting tomorrow morning. That night I stood in front of my closet, choosing tomorrow's outfit. My hand brushed against a garment bag in the back, my unworn wedding dress. I'd kept it all these years, a reminder of what they'd taken from me. Not anymore. I pulled out the bag and headed for the trash chute. As I watched it disappear into the darkness, I felt lighter. Tomorrow I would destroy what remained of their empire. Not for the girl who once loved Marquis, but for the woman I'd become while planning their downfall. My phone buzzed one last time. Marquis again. Remember when we were happy? I typed back my first and only response. Wasn't I never good enough? Then I blocked his number and went to prepare for tomorrow's execution. The final act was about to begin, and I intended to savour every moment. The board meeting was scheduled for 9 a.m, but Marcus was already having a meltdown in the lobby by 8:30. We have to stop this. He was pacing, running his hands through his hair. Everything we built is falling apart. Everything you built? Rosalie's laugh was bitter. I built this company. You just rode my coattails like always. I watched them through the glass walls, sipping my coffee. Their perfect sibling facade was cracking beautifully. Your sister's right, I said, stepping into the lobby. She built this company, through fraud, theft, and manipulation, but she built it. You don't know what you're talking about, Rosalie snapped. Don't I? I held up my tablet. A reporter just sent me some interesting questions about a lawsuit that was quietly settled 3 years ago. Ring any bells? Rosalie's face went from angry to terrified in an instant. You can't? The lawsuit you settled with my dowry money? The one where your first investors accused you of running a Ponzi scheme? I smiled. Amazing what people find when they start digging. Marquis turned to his sister. What is she talking about? She's lying, Rosalie said quickly. Like she lied about the photos. Oh, please, I cut in. We all heard the recording. You admitted faking those photos. Just like you're about to admit where you really got the money to settle that lawsuit. The elevator dinged. Max stepped out with 2 men in suits. Miss Burns, one of them nodded. We've reviewed the documents you sent. Very concerning. Who are they? Marquis asked, voice shaking. SEC investigators, Mac answered. I called them. Rosalie lunged for her brother's arm. Marquis, don't let them... He jerked away from her. Did you steal Vanessa's money? I protected our family. By committing fraud? His voice rose. By destroying my relationship? By lying to everyone? You knew, she screamed. You knew about the photos. You signed the papers. Don't pretend you're innocent. The investigators watched this exchange with interest, taking notes. Perhaps, one said, we should continue this discussion in a more official capacity. The board meeting that followed was chaos. As controlling shareholder, I presented evidence of Rosalie's financial misconduct. Mac confirmed his findings. The SEC investigators shared preliminary concerns. Rosalie's carefully maintained composure finally shattered. You want to know the truth? She stood wild-eyed. Fine. I took the money. I faked the photos. I couldn't let him marry some nobody who would drag our name through the mud. And look. She gestured at me violently. Look what she did anyway. Ms. Young, an investigator interrupted. Are you confessing to financial fraud? The blood drained from her face as she realised what she'd done. Marquis had his head in his hands. It's over, he mumbled. Everything's over. Mr. Young, I said quietly. Would you like to explain to the board why you signed documents authorising your sister to steal my money, even before you ended our engagement? He looked up, tears in his eyes. I was weak. I knew something wasn't right about the photos, but Rosalie said if I didn't end it, she'd cut me off from the family money, from everything. I chose wrong. I'm so sorry. Save your apologies, I stood. The board needs to vote on new leadership. Given the circumstances, I moved to remove both Rosalie and Marquis from their positions, effective immediately. The vote was unanimous. As security escorted them out, Rosalie turned to me one last time. You'll regret this. No, I said, I won't. Later, Tamara found me in my office, watching news coverage of the scandal. A reporter dug up something else, she said, handing me her phone. Apparently, Rosalie used your stolen money to not only settle that lawsuit, but also to bribe the original complainants into silence. It's going to be a criminal investigation now. I leaned back, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. 5 years of planning, and it ended in 1 day of self-destruction. Was it worth it? I thought about Marquis' tears, Rosalie's screams, the complete dismantling of their perfect facade. Almost, I said. But there's one more thing I need to do. I pulled out my phone and opened my email. There, saved as a draft for 5 years, was my original wedding announcement. the one that never ran, the one that would have told the world about our love, our future, our dreams. I hit delete. Some stories don't need to be told, some endings are better left in silence, and some revenge plots work best when you let your enemies destroy themselves. The final board meeting was set for 10 a.m. I arrived early, watching the morning news coverage on my phone. My Prime Wellness Scandal deepens, SEC investigation launched. Tamara rushed in. You need to see this. She pulled up a video on her tablet. Rosalie was on a morning show, trying to spin the story. These allegations are false, she was saying. This is a vindictive attack by a woman who never got over my brother. I laughed. She still doesn't get it. The boardroom filled quickly. Investors, board members, press. Marquis slipped in last, looking haunted. Rosalie was notably absent, probably advised by her lawyers to stay away. Let's begin. I stood at the podium. As controlling shareholder of My Prime Wellness, I've called this meeting to address recent events and announce structural changes. Camera shutters clicked, reporters scribbled. 5 years ago, I was supposed to marry Marquis Young. Instead, I discovered a pattern of deception that went beyond a broken engagement. I clicked through slides showing financial records, the fraudulent contract, the lawsuit settlements. Ms. Burns, a reporter interrupted, are you saying this corporate takeover was personal? No, I smiled. I'm saying karma takes many forms. Sometimes it looks like justice. Sometimes it looks like truth. Today, it looks like this. I played the full recording. Not just Rosalie's admission about the photos, but everything. The financial confessions, the threats, the years of manipulation. Marquis stood up. Please, I can explain. Sit down, I said quietly. You've done enough talking. He sat. The SEC investigation will continue, I announced. But as of today, I'm formally stepping down from My Prime Wellness. My shares will be distributed among ethical investors who can rebuild this company's reputation. Gasps filled the room. This wasn't the power grab they expected. I didn't come here for a company, I continued. I came here for truth, for justice. And now everyone knows exactly who the young siblings really are. You're destroying us, Marquis called out. No, I turned to face him. You destroyed yourselves. I just provided the audience. Cameras flashed as I walked out, Tamara beside me. In the lobby, Mac was waiting. That was impressive, he said. Scary, but impressive. The company's yours now, I told him, along with other ethical investors. Don't waste the opportunity. Back in my office, I watched the news explode. Rosalie's morning show appearance was being torn apart as new evidence emerged. Marquis' tearful boardroom protest was already trending. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You think you've won? This isn't over. I showed it to Tamara. Should we be worried? About what? She scoffed. She's facing criminal charges. Her reputation is destroyed. Her own brother finally turned on her. She's finished. A knock at my door. Another reporter. Ms. Burns, can we get a statement about Rosalie Young's arrest? I looked up sharply. Arrest? Just happened. FBI picked her up trying to board a private plane. Something about additional financial crimes they uncovered. After the reporter left, Tamara whistled low. Damn, you didn't plan that part, did you? No, I admitted. But like I said, karma takes many forms. My phone rang. Marquis again. This time I answered. What? They arrested her. His voice broke. They're investigating me too. Everything we had, it's all gone. Goodbye, Marquis. Wait, I never stopped. I hung up. Tamara poured 2 glasses of champagne. To karma? To truth, I corrected. The thing about lies is they always unravel. Rosalie spent years building her house of cards. I just had to wait for the right moment to blow. And Marquis? I thought about his tears in the boardroom, his desperate calls, his weakness. Marquis gets to live with his choices, I said, just like I lived with mine. The sun was setting over the city as we packed up my office. I wouldn't be coming back. My work here was done. You know what's funny? I told Tamara as we left. 5 years ago, this revenge was everything I wanted. Now, I just feel free. Because you won. Because I'm done, I corrected. Their chapter in my life is finally over. My phone buzzed one last time. A news alert. Young siblings face federal charges in wellness company scandal. I deleted it without reading. Some stories write their own endings. This one had written exactly the ending they deserved. Let's get dinner, I told Tamara. I'm thinking somewhere expensive. Maybe that place Rosalie always said was too common for her taste. We laughed all the way to the elevator, leaving the wreckage of the young family empire behind us. The morning sun streamed through my home office window as I pinned the last newspaper clipping to my corkboard. Young siblings plead guilty in federal fraud case. Next to it hung the old contract amendment, the fake photos, and a copper lantern from what should have been my wedding day. My phone buzzed. Malachi was calling. Still coming to breakfast? He asked. We'd been dating for 3 months, taking things slow. He knew my story, understood my scars. On my way, just finishing something. At the cafe, he greeted me with a kiss. Saw the news. How are you feeling? Lighter, I said, settling into our usual corner booth. Like I can finally breathe. No regrets? About them? No. I stirred my coffee. About who I became during the revenge. Sometimes. You're not like them, he said quietly. You chose justice, not cruelty. There's a difference. Before I could respond, Tamara burst in. Turn on the news! Now! The cafe's TV showed Rosalie being led into court. The headline shocked me. Additional victims come forward in young scandal. More people they scammed, Tamara explained. Your story gave them courage to speak up. My phone lit up with messages. Other women Marquis had dated, all with similar stories of manipulation and lies. They wanted to thank me for exposing the truth. See? Malachi squeezed my hand. Sometimes revenge isn't just about you. The bell above the cafe door chimed. I looked up to see Mac entering with a woman I didn't recognize. Vanessa, he smiled, meet my new business partner. We're rebranding the company completely. Ethical wellness, transparent practices. Would you consider consulting? Not as revenge this time, as redemption. I glanced at Malachi, who nodded encouragingly. Maybe. But first, tell me about your vision. As Mac outlined his plans, I felt something shift inside me. The anger that had driven me for 5 years was fading, replaced by possibility. My phone buzzed again. A text from an unknown number. I'm sorry. For everything. M. I showed it to Tamara. Marquise? Probably his last free text before prison, she said. Want to respond? I thought about it, then deleted the message. Some conversations were better left unfinished. You know what I realized? I told Malachi later, as we walked through the park. I kept that wedding dress all these years, thinking I needed it to remember, but I don't want to remember anymore. I want to create something new. Like what? Like a foundation, I said slowly. For people who've been scammed or betrayed, to help them find their voice, their power. He stopped walking, turned to face me. That's perfect. Taking your pain and making it purpose. Back home, I stood before my corkboard one last time. The newspaper clippings, the evidence, the memories. They told a story of revenge, yes, but also of survival, of transformation. I took down the copper lantern last, not to throw away this time, but to place on my desk. A reminder that sometimes the best revenge isn't destruction, it's creation. Tamara called as I was redecorating my office. You'll never believe who I just saw. Rosalie's former assistant. Says she has files, recordings, everything. Wants to write a book. Tell her no, I said firmly. Let Rosalie fade into obscurity. That's worse than any exposé. You're different, Tamara observed. Lighter? I'm free, I corrected, and I'm ready to help others find their freedom too. The sun was setting as I drafted the mission statement for my new foundation. My phone buzzed with a message from Malachi. Dinner tonight? I want to hear more about your plans. I smiled, thinking how different this felt from 5 years ago. Back then, I'd been consumed by the need for revenge. Now, I was building something meaningful from the ashes of betrayal. The copper lantern caught the last rays of sunlight, casting warm patterns on my wall. Once, it had represented a future that was stolen from me. Now it symbolized something else, the light that comes after darkness, the strength that grows from pain. I typed my response to Malachi. Yes to dinner, and yes to everything else. It wasn't forgiveness I'd needed all along. It was clarity. And karma just needed an invitation and the patience to let justice unfold in its own perfect time. The lantern glowed in the dying light, a beacon pointing not to the past, but to a future I was finally ready to embrace.
My name is Helen, and I recently turned 30. Looking back, I realize how much I believed in the power of love, convinced that it could fix everything, especially the man I chose to marry. His name was Scott, and he had his fair share of issues, which I thought I could help him overcome. I thought that if I just loved him enough, he'd find his self-worth. But love, I learned the hard way, can't do that. It can't make someone love themselves. Scott was obsessed with gaining the approval of his parents, an obsession that went far beyond simply wanting to make them proud. His entire existence seemed shaped by this need for their validation. Mr. and Mrs. Kyle, his parents, however, were indifferent at best, which only made his craving for their attention more desperate. It was heartbreaking to watch. Over time, I realized I couldn't fill the emotional emptiness they left in him. What made matters worse was Scott's reckless spending. He would drain our savings on lavish gifts and vacations for his parents, things they hardly appreciated. It often felt as though I was competing for his attention, trying to hold on to what was left of our relationship while his parents consumed his every thought. Despite the constant conflicts and frustration, I still loved Scott. I hoped, almost naively, that one day he'd break free from their suffocating expectations and find peace within himself. But it became painfully clear that no amount of love could save him from the influence of his parents. Then came the day when Scott, wearing a serious expression, told me he needed to talk. With everything that had happened, I braced myself for another disagreement. This one, I feared, might be the worst yet. Helen, I need to tell you something important, he said, his voice unusually solemn. What's going on? I asked, my heart sinking, dreading whatever was about to come. It's about my parents. They're retiring soon, and I want to surprise them with a luxury vacation. It's going to be expensive, he said, his face a mix of excitement and anxiety. That sounds like a nice gesture, I said, trying to keep my voice calm, but I don't think we should dip into our joint savings again. It's really important we stick to our budget. I don't have enough saved up to cover it, he admitted. I was hoping we could use some of our savings. Scott, if it's more than we can afford, maybe we should think twice, I said gently, trying to bring some reason into the conversation, but my words only upset him. You don't get it, Helen, he snapped. I love my parents. I want to do something special for them. Love isn't about counting pennies, it's about making grand gestures. I tried again, but love is also about being practical, and making sacrifices together, not at the expense of our future. I have to do this for them, Scott insisted. I thought you'd understand, they mean everything to me. They're not the only ones who matter, I said, my frustration starting to build. I love you, Scott, but we need to be realistic. We can't blow all our savings on one trip. He didn't see it that way. He accused me of being selfish, of not understanding the importance of his gesture. It's not about being selfish, I countered. It's about being sensible. We can't just throw away $35,000 on a whim. You're being heartless, he shot back, completely dismissing my concerns. No, I'm being realistic, I said, feeling a growing distance between us with every word. This isn't how things work. The argument grew more intense, with emotions running high. Things were thrown in anger, objects shattered, and amidst all the chaos, Scott dropped a bombshell. If I couldn't support him, he wanted a divorce. I was stunned, but instead of reacting with panic or begging him to stay, I simply looked at him and said, Okay, Scott, if that's really what you want. His face shifted from anger to shock. He had expected me to beg, to fight for the marriage, but instead, he was met with calm resolve. I was done. I couldn't keep sacrificing my peace for his endless pursuit of approval from his parents. If he was going to chase an unattainable dream, he could do it alone. He tried to argue, but I stopped him with a raised hand. I couldn't continue fighting for a love that was always weighed down by unrealistic expectations and the need for constant validation. Go ahead, spend every last penny trying to win over people who barely notice you, I said, my voice steady as I made the final decision to end the cycle of disappointments and broken promises. In that moment, the truth hit him like a ton of bricks. Our marriage had turned into a battlefield, and it was time for both of us to surrender and find peace on our own terms. A month has passed since our divorce was finalized, and I can honestly say that the freedom feels indescribable. The endless arguments about finances and the futile chase for approval that was never ours to claim are now behind me. I can finally breathe, unburdened by the weight of his insecurities that once dominated my days. Every new morning feels brighter, lighter. Scott has tried to reach out, acting concerned, asking how I'm doing, but I see through his act. I've learned my lesson. As the saying goes, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. I turned my back on his attempts to rekindle what we once had. I realized I'd spent too much time trying to fix someone who wasn't interested in changing. It was time for me to focus on my own happiness and growth. Rebuilding my life wasn't easy. Splitting our assets and adjusting to a new financial reality took patience and grit. I had grown accustomed to a certain lifestyle, but I embraced the challenge of reshaping my future. In the process, I discovered strengths within myself I never knew existed, reconnecting with old friends, revisiting hobbies I had neglected, and exploring new interests opened up a world of possibilities. I was determined to make this fresh start count. Sure, there were moments of self-doubt, loneliness, and the struggle to adapt to a tighter budget. The scars from my failed marriage didn't vanish overnight, but with every passing day, I found peace in knowing that I no longer had to sacrifice my happiness for someone else's insecurities. It was almost startling how easily I moved forward. It was as if I had been clinging to a relationship that was destined to fail for far longer than I'd realized. Once free from that emotional weight, I was amazed at how much I could accomplish on my own. A month into this new chapter, I still had moments of adjustment, but I felt more empowered than ever. Then, Scott's messages took a strange turn. He claimed he was in trouble and urgently needed to meet. Skeptical but curious, I decided it was time to address the situation head-on. I called him. Scott, we've been over this. We're divorced. It's time to move on, I said, firm and unwavering. Helen, please, I need a moment to explain. I'm in serious trouble, and you're the only one I can turn to, he pleaded, his voice desperate. Maybe there was genuine fear, or maybe it was the absence of his voice that made it sound more convincing. A part of me felt a flicker of concern. Despite everything, I couldn't help but wonder if he was truly in danger or if this was just another one of his manipulations. Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet him. Fine, I said, but we're not meeting at my place. Let's go to that cafe we used to frequent. No tricks, got it? Thank you, Helen, I promise. I just need someone to listen. You're the only one who understands, he replied, his tone one of relief. You might wonder why I agreed to meet him at all. Honestly, I questioned it myself, but sometimes, even after everything, curiosity and a lingering concern compel us to act against our better judgment. Despite the divorce, a part of me still cared. So there we were, sitting across from each other in the familiar cafe, the scent of coffee filling the air, but even the cozy atmosphere couldn't ease the tension. Watching Scott, his face tense with anxiety and those sad eyes trying to pull at my heartstrings, almost made me laugh. This time, however, I was unmoved. I leaned back, composed, in control. I was ready to listen, but on my terms. All right, Scott, you've got my attention. What's this danger you're supposedly in? But just so you know, I'm not here to save you. I'm done cleaning up your messes, Scott, I said, my tone firm but calm, signaling I was willing to listen, yet resolute in my decision to not fall back into old patterns. Scott sighed deeply, his face a mixture of regret and desperation. It was almost pitiful, but I steeled myself against any emotional manipulation. Helen, I know I've messed up before, but this time it's different. I've gotten involved with some really dangerous people. I owe them a lot of money, and they're not exactly patient, he confessed, his voice tight with fear. I raised an eyebrow, skeptical. Really, Scott? Dangerous people? Are we revisiting the story of your imaginary enemies again? My disbelief was evident as I leaned back, folding my arms across my chest. His expression shifted, a flash of hurt crossing his face, as though he expected sympathy. No, Helen, this is real. I'm in deep trouble, and you're the only one I can turn to, he insisted, desperation creeping into his voice. I shook my head, unfazed. Let me guess, this all started after the divorce? I asked, already piecing together the predictable aftermath of his decisions post-separation. Scott went on, his voice rising, a sense of urgency overtaking him. Before I knew it, my own voice was elevated too, and soon the entire cafe was witnessing our conversation. I shot a quick, apologetic look toward the other patrons, trying to regain some composure. I know I've made mistakes, Scott continued, but this mess is bigger than me. I don't know what to do. Frustration flared up within me. How could he just waltz back into my life with yet another crisis? But despite my irritation, a part of me still couldn't completely block out the lingering sympathy. How much are you in for, Scott? I asked, bracing myself for the worst. $120,000, he mumbled, almost too embarrassed to meet my gaze. $120,000? Are you out of your mind? I erupted, my voice louder than I intended. I didn't care anymore about the curious stares from nearby tables. If they were listening, they understood why I was angry. Helen, please, Scott begged, his eyes wide with desperation. I've got nowhere else to turn. You're the only one who's ever believed in me. I stared at him, feeling a momentary flash of the man I once loved, but it quickly faded. I had nothing left to give him, not now. Not after everything. Don't try to pull at my heartstrings, Scott. It's too late for that. When you said you needed help, I thought it might be $20,000, not $120,000. You've completely lost it, I said, frustration mixing with disbelief. Scott's shoulders shook as he began to cry, completely unaware of the discomfort of the people around us. Scott, get a hold of yourself. This is not the place for a scene, I said, keeping my tone firm but controlled. What's going to happen if you can't pay it back? I asked, though I already dreaded the answer. They're threatening me, Helen. They'll hurt me if I don't pay them back. I'm serious. This is bad, he said through sobs. His words hung in the air, a heavy weight that tugged at my conscience. But as much as I felt a faint flicker of concern for him, I couldn't ignore my need to protect myself from being dragged back into his chaos. Seeing how real his fear seemed, I reluctantly softened my approach. All right, Scott, tell me everything. Start from the beginning. He took a shaky breath, then launched into the story of his ill-fated attempt to fund an extravagant trip for his parents. He'd borrowed money from unreliable sources, trusting a friend who ultimately betrayed him. The result was a pile of debt with no way out. I listened, my frustration bubbling under the surface. Part of me couldn't help but feel a dark amusement at the absurdity of it all. So, you borrowed money from dangerous people to impress your parents, who hadn't even noticed your efforts. Is that what happened? I asked, trying to untangle the mess he'd made. Scott's face fell, and tears flowed freely as he acknowledged the painful truth. Yes, ever since they came back from that trip, it's like I don't matter to them anymore, he said, his voice thick with regret. I felt the anger rise in me again, but there was a part of me that couldn't ignore his remorse. It was a hard lesson for him to learn, and seeing him so devastated stirred a reluctant sympathy. You've really dug yourself into a hole, Scott, I said, my voice calm but firm. I know you don't want to hear I told you so, but you've made your own bed. I warned you this was a bad idea. You chose this path, even after I told you how it would play out, and now you're stuck. You've put everything into trying to win your parents' approval, but all you got in return was their indifference. It's a tough lesson, but it's one you had to learn. I paused, my words laced with a mixture of concern and resignation. It was a bitter truth for both of us. Scott had tied his self-worth to people who never appreciated him, and I had to accept that I couldn't shield him from the consequences of his choices. I had always been on his side, but he had placed his value in the wrong things. Now, this was his mess to clean up. The silence between us grew heavy, thick with the weight of the past, our broken promises, unfulfilled dreams, and the regrets that had settled like dust between us. In that moment, I knew it was time to let go for good. No more second chances, no more attempts to fix what had long been beyond repair. Scott had to face the consequences of his actions on his own, and I needed to move forward and find my own happiness, free from the chaos of our past. I hope you figure this out, Scott, I said, my voice carrying a tone of finality. Wait, you're not going to help? He asked, clearly caught off guard by my response. No, I replied, without hesitation. Why not? He pressed, his desperation unmistakable. Because I don't have the money to bail you out, and even if I did, going into debt for you again, taking on a loan I'd still be paying off for years, isn't something I'm willing to do, I explained, my tone unwavering. I can't afford to be as reckless as you've been. Please, Helen, I'm begging you, he said, his voice cracking with emotion. I shook my head, feeling my patience wear thin. Scott, it's not realistic to expect me to fix this, especially after everything. You're my ex-husband, not my responsibility. Yeah, I expected you to help. You're not my enemy, you're my ex-wife, he muttered, still holding on to a flicker of hope. But it was clear now that we had become two people living entirely separate lives. My priority was finding peace and happiness, without him. And that's exactly the problem, I said, leaning forward slightly. You always expect me to clean up after you because I did that when we were married, but I can't, and I shouldn't, keep doing that. It's not my job anymore. A pause lingered, and then I added, after everything, I don't owe you anything, especially after how you wasted our money on your ungrateful and toxic parents. But I love them, Scott said, his voice softening, almost pleading. And I love myself, I replied, my voice steady. Loving myself means doing what's best for me now, which includes protecting my well-being. Scott looked down, realizing that he wouldn't be getting the help he so desperately wanted. There was nothing more I could give him, and it pained me to see the depths of his hopelessness, but I couldn't let his desperation pull me back into his spiral. With a quiet sigh, I offered one last piece of advice. It seems like you're out of options, so here's one suggestion: leave. Go somewhere far enough away where they can't find you. I don't know what else you're asking from me. He sat still, the weight of my words sinking in. He was upset, angry even, but I knew deep down he understood. This was the end of the road. This is it, Scott, I continued, my voice clear and final. We're going our separate ways. I can't keep getting entangled in your messes. We both need to find our own peace. His voice wavered, bitterness creeping in. If you really cared, you'd help me. I shook my head. I'm saying goodbye, Scott. I'm changing my number, too, I said, standing up, my resolve firm as I turned and walked away. I left him there, sitting alone, his expression a jumbled mix of frustration, sadness, and maybe even a touch of realization. It wasn't easy, but it was the only choice I could make, for my own happiness and dignity. I've been searching for my favorite bracelet for days now, and I can't shake the suspicion that my mother-in-law might have taken it without asking. This isn't the first time either. She has a habit of helping herself to my things without permission, and it always leaves me feeling violated. My husband, Richard, trying to defuse the situation, says, "It was a gift from your mom, just let it go." His constant defense of her, even when she's clearly in the wrong, is maddening. It feels like he never stands up for me, and it only makes things harder. But then, something far worse happened. Richard's beloved luxury car was stolen, and I know exactly who took it. My name is Julie, and I'm 30 years old. Up until recently, my life with Richard had been perfect. We'd just celebrated our first wedding anniversary, and things seemed blissfully settled until everything changed. We both work, but I usually finish my tasks early and start dinner while I wait for Richard to come home. One evening, he came through the door with unexpected news. His mother would be moving in with us indefinitely after the recent death of his father. She was lonely and needed to be closer to us as she got older. "Wait, she's moving in?" I asked, struggling to process the sudden change. Richard nodded, his expression unreadable. "Yes, she's feeling isolated. She needs us now more than ever." I felt the weight of the news sink in. "But you should have talked to me about this first. We have our own lives. Shouldn't we consider it carefully?" Despite my concerns, Richard gave a small shrug, a sign he had already made up his mind. "It's not a big deal. She just wants to feel safe and secure. I get that she's lonely, but this is a huge decision. We should have discussed it first," I pressed, trying to make him see how unfair this was. Richard sighed, clearly irritated. "Why do I have to explain everything to you, Julie?" "Because she's your mom, not mine," I replied, the frustration building. "I'm the one who has to rearrange everything, our lives, our home. Why aren't you considering how I feel?" Richard's tone hardened. "It's already decided, just deal with it." I stood there, stunned by his dismissal. He turned away and walked out of the room without another word, leaving me to stew in my own frustration. How could he make such a major decision without even consulting me? It didn't matter how I felt. My needs were secondary. Richard rarely helps around the house, and dismisses any concerns I have about the disruption. To him, it's just no big deal. It's his mother, after all. True to form, the following week, my mother-in-law arrived as though she had lived here all along. I might have been more accepting of the situation if she weren't so rude and condescending. Every encounter with her left me feeling drained. She made it clear from the moment she stepped in that I wasn't her equal, and now I had to live under her roof. The first day, she didn't waste any time making her presence known. "Julie, did you know I was coming today? There's trash in the corner," she said, her voice sharp. "I'm sorry, I was busy working and didn't have time to clean," I explained. Excuses, excuses. Couldn't you have done it after work? But then I wouldn't have had time to cook dinner. "Oh, please, how do you even manage being Richard's wife? You should be more efficient," she snapped. I bit back my frustration, offering a shaky apology, feeling more and more overwhelmed. She had barely been here 15 minutes, and I already felt like I was suffocating. As the days passed, her controlling behavior only worsened. She was constantly criticizing me, making it impossible to feel at ease in my own home. Every small thing I did seemed wrong in her eyes, and the tension built to a breaking point. Then, one day, something unexpected happened. I came home from work to find her greeting me with an almost unnerving smile. "Welcome home," she said cheerfully, which caught me off guard. As I hung up my coat, something shiny caught my eye. There was a necklace around her neck. "Wait," I said, stepping closer. "Is that my necklace?" The familiar design made my heart skip a beat. Anxiety washed over me as I hurried to my bedroom to check my jewelry box. Sure enough, it was missing. I returned to the living room and confronted her, trying to keep my composure. That necklace, it's mine, isn't it? I asked, my voice tight. She looked up at me, a smirk playing at the corners of her mouth. Oh, you noticed. It looks better on me, don't you think? Her response hit me like a slap in the face. I was speechless for a moment. Please, stop taking my things without asking. It's not right, I said, my frustration finally bubbling over. She waved me off dismissively. What's the big deal? It's just a necklace. Stop complaining and get dinner ready. Richard will be home soon. I tried to focus on dinner, but her continued interference only added to my mounting stress. That night, I knew I had to talk to Richard about it. Hey, Richard, can we talk? I asked as he walked in. What's up? He asked, his voice casual. Today, I found your mom wearing my necklace. She didn't ask for my permission, I said, trying to stay calm. Richard raised an eyebrow. So, she went into your room, opened your jewelry box, and just took it? Are you sure you're not overreacting? I'm not overreacting, I replied, my patience fraying. This is exactly what happened. Come on, I'm sure Mom didn't mean any harm, Richard said, brushing off the situation as if it were nothing. I felt a surge of anger at his immediate defense of her. Trying to stay calm, I took a deep breath and pressed on, hoping he'd understand. So, it's okay for her to just walk into my room and take my things without asking? I shot back. A normal person would at least apologize when they take something that isn't theirs. Richard shrugged. Well, she probably just saw something she liked and grabbed it, but honestly, that's not the issue here. Richard, you need to talk to her about respecting my space. Telling her off won't change anything, he replied, his tone dismissive. But you're her son, maybe she'll listen to you, I insisted, my frustration mounting. You need to handle this. Fine, he muttered, rolling his eyes, I'll talk to her, but despite his reluctant agreement, the conversation seemed to have left his mind by the next morning. Over breakfast, I shot him a few pointed glares, but he didn't mention it to his mother. As the days went by, my mother-in-law began treating my belongings like they were hers to borrow at will. My complaints were ignored, and without locks on any of the doors, confronting her seemed pointless unless she decided to change her behavior on her own. I could already feel my things slipping away, and if this continued, I feared they would vanish permanently. I needed a plan to stop her. Then one day, something happened that I couldn't overlook. I had plans to meet a friend, and I wanted to wear my late mother's bracelet, something I had kept hidden in a secret compartment in my desk, far from the jewelry box, but it was gone. The only person who could have taken it was my mother-in-law. I marched into the living room and confronted her directly. Where's my bracelet? I demanded, my voice sharp. She barely looked up from what she was doing. Oh, the bracelet? I just borrowed it, she said casually, as though it were no big deal. No, I snapped. Give it back now. My heart was pounding in my chest. This wasn't just a bracelet, it was a connection to my mother. Something irreplaceable. I need it back immediately. I can't do that, she replied coolly. Why not? I asked, my mind racing. Because I sold it, she answered, as if it were the most ordinary thing in the world. I stood frozen, my mouth dry. What, you sold it? Are you kidding me? My hands were shaking, but I tried to stay calm. Stop messing around and give it back. I'm not joking, she said with a shrug. By the way, most of the stuff I've borrowed from you, I've sold those too. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My world seemed to tilt as I stared at her in disbelief. Before I could say anything else, Richard, who had just woken up, walked into the room. I quickly explained the situation, my voice trembling with a mixture of anger and shock. Richard, listen to this, I said, forcing myself to stay calm. Your mom sold my bracelet, the one that belonged to my late mother, and she's been selling off everything she's borrowed from me without asking. Richard's face shifted from confusion to disbelief. Is that true? He asked, looking at his mother, his voice a mix of shock and anger. My mother-in-law stuck out her tongue, as though the situation were some kind of joke. I'm on a fixed income, you know, she said with a shrug. I didn't want to be a burden, but I can't make ends meet without a little extra cash. I stared at her, incredulous. You've got to be kidding me. Who gave you the right to take and sell my things? Don't get so upset, she said, trying to downplay it. I didn't mean any harm. If you didn't mean any harm, you wouldn't be selling other people's things, I shot back, my patience evaporating. She opened her mouth to say something, but I cut her off. Where did you sell it? You need to get it back right now. I demanded. Where is my bracelet? You need to give it back right now. Just then, Richard shouted. Enough is enough. To my shock, he wasn't directing his anger at his mother. Instead, he was glaring at me, confused and hurt. I asked, why are you yelling at me, Richard? Your mom took my bracelet without asking. Be quiet, he snapped, I did it for Mom. Stop complaining. For Mom? Seriously? Why should I give up my things just to make her happy? My voice was rising, frustration spilling over. Because it makes Mom happy, Richard said, his tone cold. She's your mother-in-law. Show some respect and just do as you're told. I stood there, speechless, my mind racing. How could he not see how unfair this was? How could he expect me to simply hand over my belongings for his mother's comfort? The whole situation felt impossible to bear. I couldn't handle it anymore, his mother constantly stealing from me, and Richard always siding with her. It was like I didn't even matter. That's it. If you won't take this seriously, then maybe we should just get a divorce. My voice was thick with emotion, my breaking point finally reached. Stop joking about divorce, Richard retorted, dismissing me. I'm not joking, Richard. I'm dead serious, I shot back, my resolve hardening. Fine, whatever, I'll get the divorce papers today, he said, his voice laced with annoyance. Fine, if that's what you want, I'm okay with it, I responded, equally resolute. As we stood there in tense silence, I noticed a satisfied smirk tugging at the corners of his mother's mouth. It hit me all at once, she had never liked me. Her real goal was to drive me out, to secure the house for herself and her son. That night, Richard returned home with the divorce papers already filled out. After signing them, I began packing my things. I didn't know when I would leave, but I was preparing for it. The next day, during my lunch break at work, I saw multiple missed calls from my sister, Megan, who lived nearby. A sense of dread washed over me as I immediately called her back. Megan, what's going on? I asked, my voice tight with concern. It's true, she said, her tone urgent. I took a picture, I'll send it to you now, so you can see for yourself. Okay, I'll check it, I replied, trying to stay calm. After hanging up, I waited for the photo, the evidence that could expose my mother-in-law's lies. That evening, as I was preparing dinner, Richard rushed into the kitchen, panic written all over his face. Julie, this is bad. My car, my prized car, it's gone. Wow, that's serious, but why aren't you more upset? I asked, confused by his sudden accusatory tone. You've wanted that car forever. We're still paying off the loan. Where could it have gone? Don't tell me, Julie, did you take it? His words hit like a slap, the suspicion in his voice piercing. Of course not, Richard. I have my own car, I retorted, my frustration boiling over. I couldn't believe he was accusing me, but then I looked over at his mother, who quickly averted her gaze. The smallest action spoke volumes. Richard, I think your mom knows something about this, I said, my voice steady but full of tension. Why would my mom know anything about it? He asked, clearly confused. I turned to my mother-in-law, who had gone pale. What do you know about the car, exactly? Julie, what are you talking about? How is my mom involved? Richard asked, still trying to make sense of everything. Well, I got a call from Megan today, I explained. She was shopping and saw your mom driving your car. It's hard to miss. It's a rare, blue model. Megan even recognized the license plate. Richard's eyes went wide as he turned to his mother, fury beginning to build. Wait, what? He demanded. My mother-in-law stammered. No, Richard, I just borrowed it for a bit. Borrowed? Are you serious? I've told you 100 times not to touch that car. Richard's anger flared. I'm sorry, but I really wanted to drive it, she said sheepishly. Well, what did you do with the car? Did you leave it somewhere? Richard pressed, trying to piece together the puzzle. No, not exactly, she muttered nervously. I left the keys in the ignition. Maybe someone from the neighborhood took it. Stolen? Are you kidding? Richard's voice was incredulous. I swear, I drove it all the way home, she insisted, trying to sound convincing. I couldn't stay silent. I showed Richard the photo Megan had sent me. Is this why you're lying? I asked, showing the picture of my mother-in-law behind the wheel of a badly damaged luxury car. Megan sent this just in case you wrecked the car and couldn't drive it back. No, that's not what happened, she stammered, cornered by the evidence. Where is the car now? Richard demanded, his patience snapping. Richard was practically shaking with rage as he stared down his mother. You wrecked my car, and now what? You just give it back? Calm down, Richard, she said, trying to calm him, but it was clear she was losing control. How am I supposed to stay calm? You're the one who's paying for the repairs, Richard snapped, his anger rising with every word. But then his mother dropped the bombshell. That's not possible. I've already sold the car, she confessed, her voice a mixture of guilt and deflection. Sold it? Are you serious? That car is in my name, Richard exclaimed, his shock evident as disbelief surged through him. I found a dealer. He said they buy any car. He told me I could even sell it on someone else's behalf. So, I sold it for $5,500, she admitted, her tone trembling. Richard's face drained of color. The luxury car he had cherished for years, something that could have easily fetched hundreds of thousands, had been sold for a mere $5,500. His mother had been taken advantage of by a shady dealer, selling it for a fraction of its worth, likely because she didn't know the true value. When Richard fully understood the extent of the damage, his fury exploded. He yelled at his mother in a way I'd never seen before. "Are you kidding me? Do you have any idea how much that car meant to me?" "I'm sorry, Richard. I'll give you the $5,500, please, forgive me," his mother pleaded, her voice filled with regret. $5,500 isn't even close to enough. Get out. Richard's voice turned cold and commanding. He pushed her toward the door, locking it behind her once she left. Turning to me, his anger quickly turned to exhaustion, and he sank into a chair. "I never thought Mom could cause so much trouble. I'm sorry I didn't support you sooner," he admitted, his voice filled with defeat. "Finally, you get it," I replied, a small sense of relief washing over me. "But now that she's gone, I need to move on. We can't go back." "No, we won't," I said, my voice firm. "I want a divorce." Richard's face went white. He stumbled toward me, bewildered. "Wait, I already kicked Mom out. Why do you want a divorce now?" "Don't you see?" I said, my voice shaking with frustration. "It's not just about her anymore. This is about you, Richard. You've consistently sided with her over me, and it's not fair. I've had enough." "You're being too harsh," Richard countered, clearly stunned by my resolve. "That's rich coming from you," I shot back. "When I needed you, you chose her every time. You cared more about her comfort than our marriage. That's where my feelings for you have gone, just like they've soured for her." "Julie, please, just calm down. Think about this," Richard pleaded, his voice tinged with panic. "No, Richard, this situation exists because of your choices. You put her above us, above me, and the car? It's just a consequence of your actions. You deserve this," I said, my anger thick and unrelenting. "You really think that? Fine," he snapped, bitterness creeping in. "I hope you enjoy the mortgage and car payments. You've earned every bit of it." With those words, I grabbed my packed bags and headed out the door. There was no more need for words, no more need for reasoning. I was done. I went straight to City Hall, filed for divorce, and severed all ties with Richard, deleting his contact information from my phone. Later, I confronted my mother-in-law, demanding compensation for selling my belongings without permission. She reluctantly agreed, though I knew this wouldn't undo the damage done. As Richard struggled with the aftermath, buried in debt and regret, I embraced my newfound freedom. The weight of his choices was now his to bear. I moved into a small apartment near work, enjoying the peace and independence I had longed for. With my finances finally in my control, I reveled in the simple joy of a new life. Today, I even planned to drive to the beach, feeling the sand beneath my feet, knowing I was free to live life on my own terms. This was my fresh start, and I was determined to make the most of it. On the day we were supposed to leave for our honeymoon, I was stunned when Terry handed me divorce papers. He informed me that he planned to take his entire family on what was meant to be our romantic getaway, adding that if I didn't agree, we could simply go our separate ways. Inside, I was furious, but I managed to keep my composure and replied calmly, "That's fine, but remember, I'm still my own person." The surprise on his face gave me a small sense of satisfaction. "My name is Lauren, and I'm 38 years old, working in real estate. My career has been fulfilling, and I'm grateful for the support of my colleagues. While my work is satisfying, my personal life has always been quiet. I don't have many hobbies and had never been in a relationship until recently. Watching my friends settle down in their 30s made me feel a bit left behind, and seeing younger colleagues frequently move on to other roles only added to that feeling." Then I met Terry, introduced by a mutual friend. He was 3 years younger, with a warm smile that always made me feel comfortable. Terry was a quiet listener, never one to dominate the conversation, which made me feel valued and understood in ways I hadn't experienced before. Given my lack of romantic experience, I quickly became fond of him, and our relationship grew steadily. When we started talking about marriage, Terry's simple agreement felt natural. We'd be making decisions together, planning a wedding, deciding on a honeymoon, and choosing a future home. I looked forward to these milestones, imagining we'd face them together. Yet, I noticed that Terry rarely offered his own ideas. He always agreed with my suggestions, which made me wonder if he'd truly stand beside me in the long term. There was also another concern, my relationship with my mother-in-law. Unlike Terry's easygoing nature, she was assertive, often disregarding my opinions. At our first meeting, she had laid out her expectations clearly. "Lauren, once you're married, you'll leave your job to focus on the household, right? You're not getting any younger, and if you wait too long, you might not have children. Terry is working hard, so you should dedicate yourself to family life." She held traditional views, believing that the husband should work while the wife managed the home. What she didn't know was that I actually earned more than Terry. He didn't mind this and had even mentioned it to his parents. But his mother was critical, saying, "A woman who earns more than her husband isn't appealing. Besides, can you even manage household chores?" Her words were condescending, casting doubt on my ability to cook, clean, or care for my husband. Despite her judgments, I knew I was fully capable of managing a household. I had lived independently for years and was determined not to abandon my career after marriage. When my mother-in-law criticized me, Terry stayed silent, simply nodding in agreement with her. His lack of support made me wonder if I could rely on him in the future. Part of me thought he might become more assertive as he matured, but another part worried that if this marriage didn't work, I might not have another chance. My mind was torn between hope and uncertainty. In the midst of these doubts, the wedding planning consumed my days. I juggled endless details, choosing a venue, arranging a honeymoon, coordinating time off work. As the stress mounted, so did my anxiety about the future. One day, I brought up our honeymoon plans, mentioning that, due to our work schedules, we had a narrow window for a long trip. "Should we go during this time?" I asked. "Yeah, that sounds good to me," Terry replied. It was fortunate that both our schedules aligned, making this the perfect opportunity for a honeymoon. However, there was a snag with the wedding venue. The place I had dreamed of was fully booked for the next year. "What do you think about taking the honeymoon before the wedding?" I suggested. "Some couples do that, and if we waited until after, it might be years before we could take the trip." "If you're okay with it, Lauren, then I'm fine with it too," Terry replied. Although I appreciated his lack of opposition, his easy agreement left me wishing he'd offer more of his own thoughts. Still, I moved forward with our plans. We eventually decided on Europe for our honeymoon. I was torn between Florida, with its ease and convenience, and Europe's allure. In the end, I chose Italy, captivated by the idea of walking through beautiful streets, enjoying exquisite food, and shopping at local boutiques for unique keepsakes and elegant tableware to celebrate the start of our new life together. After carefully weighing schedules and destinations, I finalized all our travel arrangements about a month before we were set to leave. My excitement was sky high. It would be my first trip overseas, and I couldn't wait to embark on this adventure with Terry. I hoped it would bring us closer and inspire him to open up more. Planning our European honeymoon had fully absorbed me. I spent days selecting travel essentials and mapping out our itinerary, feeling genuine joy that momentarily eased any lingering doubts I had about Terry. But a week before we were supposed to leave, Terry came to me with an unexpected request. I was curious since he rarely asked for anything directly. Could it be something special for the trip? Maybe a hidden gem in Venice he wanted to explore? Eager to hear, I asked what was on his mind. Without missing a beat, he dropped a bombshell. "I want to go to Burano while we're in Venice. Mom's been wanting to see it." I stared, stunned. "Your mom? Wait, what do you mean?" I could hardly process what he was suggesting, but Terry looked at me as if this were all completely natural. "Well, since everyone's coming along, we'll all be together for the trip, right?" "Everyone? What are you talking about? This is our honeymoon, Terry, it's supposed to be just us," I said, struggling to mask my frustration. But he continued calmly, "Mom thinks it's perfectly normal for the whole family to join us." I felt my pulse quicken. "Terry, I made reservations for the two of us only. The final booking deadline was a few days ago, and today's the last chance to confirm. If you're serious about this, you'll have to check with the travel agency." Before I could fully absorb the situation, the intercom buzzed. On the screen, I saw my in-laws, luggage in hand. They strolled in as if this were an ordinary visit. My mother-in-law's face lit up as she exclaimed, "I thought we'd just leave our bags here since we're leaving soon." Terry quickly echoed, "Yeah, just leave the luggage here," helping them settle in without a second thought. I was flustered, and my words tumbled out. "Wait a minute." I tried to step in, scrambling for some semblance of control over our trip. My mother-in-law shot me a sharp look, her tone edged with irritation. "What's the issue, Lauren? Don't tell me you suddenly don't want us to come along," she said, almost daring me to object. "I never agreed to this arrangement in the first place," I replied, my voice firm yet shaky. I pushed back, but my mother-in-law barely acknowledged me. She turned to Terry instead, angling for his support. "You heard her, Terry. She just said no, but we always planned to go together, didn't we?" She nudged him. Terry, looking uncomfortable but unwilling to oppose her, nodded. "Yeah," he murmured, reinforcing her assumption. Sensing her advantage, my mother-in-law pressed on, disregarding my objections. "It's perfectly normal for the husband's parents to join a honeymoon. Do you have no sense? I hope you won't ruin this trip by making a fuss. We're going to make good memories together. I'll have to teach you some common sense this week before we leave. It's a special honeymoon, after all." It felt as if the ground was shifting beneath me. My frustration finally boiled over. "This is a honeymoon," I protested. "It's meant to be for the two of us." But my mother-in-law remained unmoved. "A husband's parents coming along is simply common sense. I'm surprised you'd rather exclude us. I thought we were becoming family, but it seems your ideas of common sense are different. It's sad that you don't seem to like me," she lamented, her tone heavy with feigned disappointment. Her words dripped with manipulation, and I could feel Terry starting to align himself with her. "Lauren, what's your problem?" "They're my parents," he said, casting me as unreasonable in this family versus individual standoff. "It's not feasible for all of us to go together," I stated firmly. "I booked everything for just the two of us, and, honestly, I've never heard of families joining a honeymoon." Terry's frustration flared. "I can't believe you dislike my parents so much. Lauren, that's enough." A triumphant grin spread across my mother-in-law's face. Seeing Terry side with her so unthinkingly on something so personal cut me deeply. Before I could respond, Terry guided me toward the door. The last thing I saw was his mother's smug expression as I stepped outside, feeling isolated and betrayed. Why was I cast as the villain? Why did this trip have to be marred by so much conflict? I stood there, tears streaming down my face. Hours later, a message from Terry appeared on my phone. "Check if it's still possible for them to join the tour. If not, we'll cancel and find a trip for all four of us. Think rationally so we can work this out." I was stunned. His message was devoid of apology, as though this problem stemmed entirely from me. The next few days were silent between us. Then, on the morning of our planned departure, I was still emotionally shaken but felt I couldn't just abandon everything I had prepared. As I was getting ready, the intercom buzzed. Terry was here, though strangely, he carried no luggage. Instead, he handed me an envelope. Inside were divorce papers. "After hurting my parents, you still planned to go on this trip, didn't you?" he accused. "I'm taking my family on this honeymoon." His words hit like a slap, signaling the bitter end to what should have been a joyful start to our lives together. "If you don't like it, let's just get a divorce. My mom thinks it's for the best," he added, pushing the papers toward me. At that moment, I saw him clearly. I'd once believed Terry would listen to me, that he'd stand by my side, but his real nature lay in placing his family's demands above anything else, even our relationship. This was the real Terry, the one who had no space for my feelings at all. As the truth sank in, my feelings for Terry cooled considerably. The idea of marrying him now felt like a trap, and becoming part of a family with such a controlling mother-in-law seemed out of the question. With newfound clarity, I looked at the divorce papers he'd shoved at me and, with a steady voice, said, "Fine, but remember, I'm still single." "Single? What are you talking about?" he stammered, caught off guard. "Did you forget? We agreed to hold off on the official marriage registration until the wedding day. You didn't object, Terry. In fact, you said, 'If you're fine with it, Lauren, then I'm fine too.' So here we are, no divorce needed, because we're not actually married. And this honeymoon? I can go on it under my maiden name, no problem." His face twisted through a range of emotions, finally settling on frustration. He raised his voice. "Are you seriously throwing away our marriage over a honeymoon? Get a grip, Lauren." I held my ground. "This is me being rational. I was so focused on getting married that I ignored the reality of who you are. I can't be happy with someone who doesn't respect or support their partner. I'd rather stay single forever than live like that. Thank you for helping me see that." His tone softened as he seemed to sense what he was losing. "Lauren, wait, let's calm down and try again, okay?" His voice cracked, his eyes misting with regret, but my mind was made up. "If you're set on a family trip, go ahead, with your family of 3. You'll be the one handling everything, booking, planning, all of it. If you're really up for that, then go ahead, Mr. Indecisive." To underscore my decision, I pulled out the unsigned marriage certificate, tore it up right in front of him, and watched as his mouth dropped open, stunned by my resolve. "Now do you see how serious I am? I refuse to compromise my future. It's over, Terry. Go back to your mom and cry it out. She's the one you're committed to anyway." Without another word, I shut the door behind him. I could easily picture him running back to his mother, and that only reassured me that I'd made the right choice. Afterward, I contacted the tour company to cancel our honeymoon reservations. Since it was a same-day cancellation, we were charged in full. I forwarded the bill to Terry. It only seemed fair, as his actions had turned our plans upside down. True to form, Terry went on to blame me for our breakup and spread rumors among friends and coworkers. But instead of sympathy, he earned a reputation as an immature mama's boy. His recent behavior only reinforced this image, and most people began to see him for who he was. When I shared the decision with my parents, they were surprised but quickly supportive. "Marriage isn't the only way to find happiness," my mother told me, reassuringly. As long as you're content, that's what matters. Her words lifted my spirits, and I felt grateful for their unwavering support. Ironically, this ordeal rekindled my love for travel. I decided to use my vacation days and take my first solo trip overseas, visiting historic cities I'd always dreamed of seeing. The experience was empowering, and traveling alone turned out to be immensely satisfying. Embracing solo travel, I planned further trips, with another overseas adventure already on the horizon. This new chapter of my life is filled with freedom and discovery, a journey shaped by my own choices, without anyone else's expectations or restrictions. When I married Andrew, he was working for my father, which is how we first crossed paths. After our wedding, we decided I would stay home so I could pursue my hobbies, sewing and knitting being the ones I cherished most. I loved making scarves and gloves for him each winter. Over time, my skills improved, and he proudly started comparing my handmade pieces to store-bought ones. His encouragement fueled my passion, and I dreamed of sharing this love for crafting with our future child, a thought that always brought a smile to our faces. We've been married for 6 years now. Although we haven't had children, our life together has been fulfilling. Despite his demanding job, Andrew always made an effort to spend time with me when he could, and that meant everything. Still, there were times when his work made me feel more like an afterthought than a partner. Our quiet life was disrupted 3 years ago when I suddenly collapsed at home. Dizzy and weak, Andrew rushed me to the hospital, where I woke up to hear him discussing my condition with the doctor. The diagnosis was serious, a chronic condition I would need to manage for the rest of my life. While not immediately life-threatening, the possibility of future episodes meant long hospital stays would become a part of my reality. Though overwhelmed with anxiety, I found comfort in Andrew's presence. He reassured me that everything would be okay, even when I wasn't so sure. It was during one of those hospital stays that something Andrew said stuck with me. As I reflected on the scarves and gloves I had knitted over the years, now neglected and gathering dust, he casually remarked, "I married you because you're the boss's daughter." The words cut deeper than I expected. It was a thoughtless comment, but it revealed something I hadn't fully grasped. I realized I needed to confront him, to understand how he really felt and to see if we could still cherish our relationship as we once dreamed. Despite Andrew's assurances during my hospital stay, his comforting words didn't fully ease my worries. He promised he would visit whenever he could, holding my hand and offering me reassurance that I would get through this. For a while, he kept that promise, visiting almost daily. He would sit by my side, bring my favorite sewing tools, and we would spend hours stitching together, our conversation filling the silence. Those moments were a welcome escape from the monotony of hospital life. But after about a year, the visits became less frequent. What was once a daily routine turned into an occasional appearance every few weeks. I chalked it up to his overwhelming work schedule, continuing my knitting in his absence. I focused on a scarf I planned to give him the next time he came, thinking that I'd be discharged soon. As the months went by, I also started knitting a pair of gloves to match, each stitch full of love and hope. The day he finally returned, I was eager to present him with the gloves, but when I handed them to him, the response was not what I had hoped for. "Are you still making these? It's annoying," he said flatly, pushing the scarf I had made, perfectly untouched, back into my hands, along with divorce papers. His words were sharper than anything I had ever felt. He explained that he could no longer care for me and that it was time for us to part ways. The divorce papers were signed, and just like that, our journey together was over. I had suspected something was wrong when his visits became less frequent, but the reality of it hit me like a wave. I had convinced myself it was all due to work, that the Andrew I married, the kind and caring man, would never abandon me. But when the visits stopped without explanation, I knew something was deeply wrong. When I asked him, calmly, why he wanted a divorce, it wasn't out of desperation. I had come to terms with the fact that I might have become a burden to him. If he truly wanted this, I was ready to let go. It was painful, but I understood that the life we had once dreamed of sharing was no longer possible. As Andrew's visits grew more infrequent, I couldn't ignore the growing realization that the partnership he had once promised me had slipped into something unrecognizable. Finally, I found the courage to confront him, to ask why everything had changed so drastically. His answer came swiftly and with a biting cruelty. "Isn't it obvious? Ever since I married you, it's been one problem after another. I'm so tired of those scarves and gloves you make every year. Honestly, I only married you because your dad was my boss." He laughed, but it was a harsh, bitter sound, like a slap to my face. His words laid bare a resentment I hadn't known existed, a disdain for the very things I cherished in our life together, things he had once seemed to appreciate. As he vented his anger, I noticed the luxurious, perfectly crafted scarf he wore around his neck, a scarf I hadn't made. It hit me then, with a painful clarity, that perhaps he had never truly valued the gifts I had spent so much time and love creating. Maybe they had always been nothing more than an irritation to him, a fact that wounded me deeply. After I fell ill and my father retired, Andrew's true feelings became even more apparent. In the first year of my illness, he had continued visiting, perhaps out of obligation or to maintain the image of the dedicated husband. At work, he was often praised for his apparent devotion to me, a facade that seemed to benefit him, both in his professional life and among his colleagues. When I confronted him about it, pointing out how his visits seemed more motivated by the need to preserve his image than genuine care for me, he was momentarily stunned. Then, with a kind of reluctant honesty, he admitted that my illness had actually made his life easier at work. This was a painful confirmation of what I had suspected. To Andrew, I was no longer his wife, but a means to an end, something he could use to further his own goals. The truth was a brutal awakening. Throughout my illness, he had played the role of the grieving husband in a way that earned him sympathy and accolades. If I worked late, everyone praised me for being so dedicated, he told me, his voice almost triumphant, and when I needed a break, all I had to say was, "My wife is sick," and I'd get it. It worked out perfectly, he went on, smugly explaining how my illness had even paved the way for his promotion, belittling his colleagues as fools who bought into his story. As he spoke, I didn't recognize the man I had once loved. The stranger before me wore a cruel smile that revealed his true nature. At that moment, I saw our marriage for what it truly was, a carefully constructed lie. Quietly, I accepted the reality. "If my illness was useful to you, then I guess we won't be seeing each other again," I said, my voice steady. Despite the pain, I handed him the divorce papers, and without a second glance, he took them and left, marking the end of our marriage. After he left, the full weight of everything hit me, and I was left to cry alone. Soon after, I was discharged from the hospital and went to stay with my parents. My father was furious when he learned what had really happened. "I can't believe he did this," he said, seething with anger, but by then, I had come to terms with the end of my marriage. I reassured my father, telling him that I wanted to stay with him for a while. My parents were supportive, encouraging me to focus on what made me happy, which, at that moment, was simply being with family. Before moving back for good, I decided to visit our old house one last time. When we arrived, I discovered that the front door lock was broken. We rang the doorbell and were greeted by a stranger who informed us that he had bought the house a few months ago and was now living there with his family. My parents were outraged, but by that point, I had already moved on. The house, just like my marriage, was no longer mine. I chose not to stir up trouble for the new residents and left quietly, but the matter stayed with me, nagging at my thoughts. I couldn't let it go, so I called Andrew to confront him about the house. His response was cold and indifferent. "Yeah, I sold it while you were in the hospital, kept the money for myself. It was my house to begin with," he said, as if it were nothing more than a mundane detail. His words hit me hard, but by then, I had braced myself for his selfishness and had already made the decision to move on without him. His casual tone as he mentioned selling our house only deepened my sense of disillusionment. It was a shock to learn that he had sold the house nearly a year ago, around the time when his visits and concern for me had started to fade. The fact that he made such a major decision without consulting me, especially when we were still legally married and hadn't even finalized the division of assets, was both staggering and infuriating. Though the divorce papers were signed, we had planned to meet the following week to discuss the final details. Andrew, however, had preemptively acted on his own, another betrayal I hadn't expected. When I confronted him over the phone, trying to stay composed, I told him, "You didn't understand anything." His response was confused, as if he had no idea what I was talking about. "What do you mean?" he asked, but I wasn't about to explain it over the phone. "I'll explain next week," I replied and hung up. I turned to my parents, who could see the toll this situation was taking on me. I managed to smile and asked my father for a favor. I laid out my plans, asking for his help to prepare everything we would need for the meeting. "I've already taken care of everything," my father said, offering me a reassuring smile, though I could sense the worry behind it. "We don't have much time before the meeting, but we'll manage." As my father, he likely felt a mix of guilt for introducing me to Andrew and anger at his actions, but his determination to support me was palpable, and I was grateful for that. As the meeting day drew closer, a small, unexpected smile appeared on my face as I thought about Andrew's reaction to what we had prepared. The meeting would take place at my parents' house. My parents and I sat on one side, facing Andrew across from us. Despite knowing how deeply my parents were hurt by what had happened, Andrew seemed completely indifferent, even sneering at times. His behavior wasn't just unrepentant, it was blatantly disrespectful. His arrogance only solidified my resolve. Sitting there with my parents, I felt the weight of all the injustices he had done to me, but I also felt empowered by the support of my family as we prepared to face him together. As the meeting progressed, I maintained my composure, calmly assuring Andrew, "I don't plan to ask for too much." He tried to appear generous, claiming that the money from the house sale would be enough. This statement visibly angered my father, but I placed a gentle hand on his, signaling for him to stay calm. We had the upper hand, and there was no need to escalate things further. "Before we continue, there's something important we need to address," I said, and my father handed me a document. I held it out for Andrew to see. The house was indeed in your name, but the land it sits on still belongs to my father, who holds the title, I explained, keeping my tone even. Andrew's face tightened into a frown. "So what? The house was still mine. No one can complain. Do you think this is some kind of way to get back at me?" He chuckled dismissively, clearly not understanding the gravity of the situation. "It's true that you legally sold the house," I acknowledged, "but since the land is still owned by my father, this creates a significant issue for the family who bought the house." I paused, letting the weight of my words settle. "You sold the house, but as the landowner, my father could legally demand rent from the family currently living there. That would cause them a lot of trouble, wouldn't it?" I let the silence hang for a moment, allowing Andrew to absorb the implications. "We don't want to cause problems for them, but we can't just let go of our rights to the land without compensation. We intend to offer them the opportunity to purchase the land. We won't force them out or charge rent, but it would be a major issue if they refuse to buy." I continued, "Originally, my father intended to gift us this land to build our future, not to have it sold to strangers without any consideration. If the family who bought the house refuses to purchase the land, they could even sue you for being misled, thinking they had full ownership of their new home. Can you imagine how they would feel if they learned there were unexpected costs attached to their dream home?" We decided to visit the family who had purchased the house to explain the situation and find a fair resolution. This approach not only safeguarded my family's interests but also showed consideration for the unwitting buyers, aiming to avoid further complications or distress. When we explained the circumstances to the new homeowners, they were surprisingly understanding but firm in their stance. They knew that any legal issues stemming from the sale would fall on the seller, Andrew, and even hinted at the possibility of suing him if we couldn't reach a satisfactory agreement. As I watched Andrew's face drain of color, I could see that he finally understood the gravity of the situation. He was staring at severe financial consequences. In a shaky voice, he asked, "What should I do?" I offered a slight, almost smug smile in return. "The family could buy the land from us, and that would resolve everything, but you'll have to cover the costs. Once they own both the house and the land, all the issues will be settled." I continued, explaining the complications in more detail. They didn't realize the full value of the land when they bought the house, so they might seek compensation from you. It's their decision, and the land itself is in a prime location. It could actually be worth more than the house. Even if you liquidated all your assets, you might not have enough to cover the cost. Alternatively, you could buy back the house and pay for the land, plus a relocation fee for the family. You'd get the house and land back, but after paying the family to relocate, any potential profit would be slim at best. I paused, allowing the weight of the situation to sink in before continuing. "And as for alimony, your actions have caused me considerable emotional distress. I intend to pursue compensation for that. You've used me as a pawn in your career, and now that I can see everything for what it truly was, I'm disgusted by it. I plan to seek damages for the emotional harm you've caused me. While the case may not be easy to prove, it's important to address it, especially considering your current predicament." My father, though retired, added his own voice to the conversation, his tone unwavering. "I still have plenty of connections from my career. I've spoken to former colleagues who share your opinions and know exactly what you've done. Andrew, you're being talked about behind your back. Everyone's looking down on you," he said with a grim smile, making it clear that Andrew's reputation was slipping. The realization seemed to hit Andrew hard, and for the first time, he looked genuinely unsettled. The status he had carefully built at work, using me as a stepping stone, was now crumbling. Sitting confidently across from him, I clasped my hands together, my smile wide and unrecognizable to him, one he hadn't seen from me in years, especially since our separation. "Now, let's talk about the next steps," I said, my voice calm and steady. Andrew, overwhelmed by the mounting pressure, let out a strained laugh, his eyes filling with tears. As the negotiations continued, it was clear that the advantage was mine. He agreed to pay alimony and compensate for the land on which our house had stood. We later explained this arrangement to the family who bought the house, ensuring they were treated fairly and understood the new terms. In the end, the outcome was favorable for everyone except Andrew. His reputation continued to deteriorate as the rumors my father had subtly spread throughout his company gained momentum, stripping away his status and quashing any hopes of a promotion. Eventually, the pressure became too much, and Andrew resigned from his position. My father later shared this news with me, his satisfaction evident. It was hard not to see it as karma. Andrew's ill-gotten gains, built on exploitation and deceit, had crumbled under the weight of his actions. Now, back at my parents' home, I've found solace and a new sense of purpose. I've started teaching sewing classes, which, though modestly attended by local women and children, have brought me immense joy and fulfillment. I never imagined that teaching this simple craft would bring such peace to my life, but it has. Despite not having children of my own, a dream I once shared with Andrew, I've discovered a new way to share my skills and passion with others. This journey has taught me the resilience of the human spirit and shown me that even without the future I once envisioned, life can still be rich and full of meaning. My brother generously offered for Stephen and me to stay at his home rent-free, covering all utilities as well. As someone who manages finances for a living and with Stephen working as a mechanic, we were in a comfortable position. We lived in the house I grew up in, a property filled with family history. This house was once the hub of my father's business, and there were expectations that my brother would eventually take over. To prepare, he studied economics and even spent some time at Oxford University. After returning from his studies, he joined my father in running the business. When my parents decided to retire and move away, they handed over the business to my brother and gave me the house. Stephen and I decided to make it our home, mainly because it's in an ideal location, close to public transportation, schools, hospitals, and shops. It suited our current lifestyle perfectly and would continue to do so even after our children moved out. We felt immense gratitude toward my parents for such a thoughtful gift and were looking forward to starting this new chapter. However, shortly after settling in, my peace was disturbed by frequent, intrusive visits from my mother-in-law. She would often ask about my parents' financial situation, given their past as business owners. Her questions, like, "Angela, how much money do your parents have? What will you inherit?" made me uncomfortable. I would try to brush it off, telling her I hadn't given it much thought and that the house might be the only inheritance I'd receive, but she persisted, implying that my parents had shared their financial plans with me. Her probing seemed to stem from expectations of gaining something from their wealth, even though I had made it clear that my inheritance was likely limited to the house. Her continued questions made me uneasy, and I kept my discomfort to myself, especially since my husband, Stephen, is very close to his mother. Then, something utterly unexpected happened that left me reeling. It was around 7 a.m., on a holiday morning when the doorbell rang. When I opened it, I was greeted by a mover, leaving me confused and startled. Before I could even react, my mother-in-law, along with my brother-in-law's family, showed up with the announcement that they were moving in. Their smirk sent an icy chill down my spine. Stephen, who had just woken up, seemed entirely unfazed by the situation. When I asked him about it, he shrugged and said, "What's the problem?" He casually pointed out that our house had enough space for everyone, as if it were perfectly normal for them to just show up and claim a spot. Things escalated quickly when my sister-in-law cheerfully explained that they had been invited by my brother and wouldn't need to pay for rent or utilities. She said they were looking forward to our hospitality. Meanwhile, my brother-in-law began going through the rooms, deciding which one he liked best based on the sunlight, and instructed Stephen to move our belongings to make space. It felt surreal. This was our home, but they were acting as though they owned it, opening doors, making decisions, and staking claims on rooms. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law had always been overbearing, even crossing boundaries like rifling through my bag without permission. Their behavior continued to infringe on my personal space, and I was fed up. This was the final straw. I couldn't keep quiet any longer. Standing firm, I finally said, "This is my house. Why are you acting like you own it? I've had enough. I want you all to leave." Normally, I'm calm and composed, but seeing them take over the home my parents had entrusted to me, acting as if it was theirs to control, pushed me over the edge. But instead of backing down, one of them snapped, "How dare you talk to us like that? You should be the one to leave." Then, out of nowhere, I felt a sharp sting on my cheek. At first, I couldn't comprehend what had happened. It took me a moment to realize I had been slapped. My face throbbed with pain, but it was the emotional shock that hit me hardest. In that instant, I knew I couldn't stay. I couldn't live with people who showed such blatant disrespect. I grabbed a few things and, without looking back, made the decision to leave temporarily. I found a rental apartment for the time being. It wasn't ideal, especially since it meant commuting to work, but at that moment, it felt like the only choice. Once I had settled into the rental apartment, I called my parents to explain what had happened. Even over the phone, I could feel their anger and frustration. My father, who had always been able to juggle the responsibilities of being a strict CEO and a caring father, was especially upset. I hated having to involve them in this, particularly when they were finally enjoying their retirement, but I felt I had no choice. My home, the one my parents had entrusted to me, was being overtaken, and I couldn't let that continue. As I adjusted to life in the apartment, I couldn't shake the feeling that Stephen and his family were settling in comfortably at my house. Encouraged by my brother and father's advice, I knew it was time to take action. A few days later, during a break at work, I checked my phone to find dozens of missed calls and messages from Stephen. I knew exactly why he was trying to reach me. It was time to confront the situation head-on. But this time, I would be prepared. I wouldn't face it alone. And I would take the necessary steps to reclaim what was rightfully mine. After much consideration, I decided to disconnect the electricity and water services to the house. The house was entirely dependent on these utilities, and without them, nothing would work. We hadn't yet installed solar panels, so there was no backup power source. Given the heat wave, I imagined that living without water or electricity would be incredibly inconvenient. It didn't take long for Stephen to start calling me. I figured this action would trigger a response, and sure enough, the calls started flooding in. As I was about to dismiss another one during my break, I saw his name again. "Hey, what's going on? There's no power, and the water isn't working. Did you cut off the utilities?" His voice was frantic, and I felt a pang of guilt, but I knew what I had to do. I calmly explained that since I no longer lived in the house, it didn't make sense for me to keep paying for services I wasn't using. The house was mine, and I wasn't going to keep covering utility costs when I wasn't there. The electricity and water weren't my responsibility anymore, I told him. Stephen was furious, demanding I turn the utilities back on immediately. But just because he wanted me to reinstate the services didn't mean I had to comply. I told him that if he wanted the utilities back, he would need to cover the costs himself. Every time the topic of finances came up, they insisted that since the house was mine, I should bear the costs, but their actions showed otherwise, and I wasn't about to pay for utilities when they were living in the house without my permission. I made it clear that I had no intention of renewing the utility contracts or of asking them to leave the house. After stating my position, I ended the call as my break was over. Not long after, my mother-in-law, sister-in-law, and brother-in-law all contacted me with similar complaints. Upset about the heat and the lack of water, they asked me to restore the utilities, but my decision was final. This wasn't just about the utilities, it was about setting boundaries and asserting control over my property. I firmly told them to handle the situation themselves and ended the call. I had a strong feeling they were just trying to take advantage, hoping I'd cave and they could keep living off me, but even after a week, they showed no sign of leaving. It became clear that I needed to act more decisively, so I reached out to a lawyer at my father's company. I explained the situation and asked him to send a formal notice to my husband, accusing them of trespassing. They had entered and taken over my house without permission, effectively forcing me out and treating it like their own. In the notice, I made it clear I was seriously considering legal action. This move caught my husband off guard. Surprised and anxious about the legal implications, he reached out, hoping for a way to resolve things. Knowing how much they cared about their social image, I understood that the threat of a lawsuit would cause them significant stress. They were now stuck between facing legal consequences and convincing me to let them stay. I saw right through my husband's attempts to manipulate me, but I refused to listen to his pleas or relent to his demands. Frustrated, my husband erupted during a call at work, angrily demanding that I drop the lawyer, accusing me of being self-righteous. Despite his outburst, I stayed calm and unaffected, irritated only by his audacity to assert any claim over my property. No matter how much he protested, I stood firm. If they refused to leave, legal action was inevitable. I ended the call, feeling like continuing the conversation was pointless. I had already discussed divorce proceedings with my lawyer. Later, I found missed calls from my mother-in-law and sister-in-law, but I chose not to engage. I blocked their numbers to avoid further disruption. The looming threat of a lawsuit was too much for my husband's prideful family to handle. Realizing they had no ground to stand on, they packed up and left. With the lawyer's help, the divorce negotiations went smoothly. I hired a professional cleaning service to refresh the house. After months of living in a rental, returning to my freshly cleaned home felt incredibly comforting. The peace and autonomy I regained made all my efforts worthwhile, reaffirming my decision to stand my ground and take back my space. Once I settled back in, I realized the house needed some repairs and updates. I discussed it with my father, who connected me to a reliable contractor. Planning the renovations was an exciting project, symbolizing a new chapter in my solitary life. Living alone brought an exhilarating sense of freedom. I could relax on the sofa without judgment, eat whatever I wanted, and truly enjoy the peace. But 5 months into this tranquility, I started getting calls from an unknown number. Initially, I thought it was the contractor, so I ignored it, but the calls kept coming. Finally, I answered, only to discover it was my ex-husband, someone I had just divorced, with a strict legal agreement that we wouldn't contact each other again. Annoyed and confused by his breach of our agreement, especially since he'd changed his number to reach me, I demanded to know why he was calling. Ignoring my questions, he begged me to listen. Reluctantly, I let him explain his situation. His company was facing a severe financial crisis, resulting in a significant pay cut. His mother's health was deteriorating, making it impossible for her to work, and his sister-in-law and her husband were struggling financially due to unstable jobs. Most of her earnings went to pay off her husband's debts. With his salary reduced, my ex-husband and his family were barely scraping by. I felt no sympathy for him. The memories of how they'd barged into my home, taken over without my permission, and tried to force me out were still fresh in my mind. Their earlier actions, full of disrespect, made it hard to care about their current hardships. I told him his problems were his to handle and reminded him of our legal agreement to cease all contact. As I ended the call, I couldn't help but think how unbelievable it was that the same people who had treated me so poorly now expected anything from me. I listened without a shred of sympathy as my ex-husband described their dire situation. "We're in serious trouble. We might not even be able to pay rent or buy food tomorrow. We used to be a family, right? Please help us," he pleaded, his voice breaking. But his words didn't sway me. I remembered all too well how, when I was struggling, he had stood by and done nothing to support me. He, along with my mother-in-law, had always looked down on me. My sister-in-law and brother-in-law joined in, mocking my appearance and my traditional values without any regard for my feelings. My mother-in-law not only made everything worse but also pressured me relentlessly to have a child, forcing herbal remedies on me, booking unnecessary medical appointments, and even spreading damaging rumors in the neighborhood about my ability to conceive. As these memories flooded back, it became crystal clear, there was never a time in my marriage when I felt truly supported. My once kind and caring ex-husband had become a puppet to his mother's control. I remembered a particularly painful incident shortly after we were married. I returned from an appointment to find my mother-in-law had visited our home, tearfully telling my husband she wanted to befriend me, all while secretly slandering me whenever she had the chance, both at home and in public. My sister-in-law and brother-in-law would laugh at me, ridiculing my every move. With a history like that, how could I possibly entertain the idea of helping them now? "No matter what you say, my feelings won't change. I can't help you," I said firmly, my resolve unwavering. I wouldn't allow their current desperation to pull me back into their web of manipulation and disrespect. "I'm hanging up now. Please never contact me again." I ended the call and immediately blocked the number. I knew my ex-husband well enough to expect that he might try to contact me again using a different number, but I was ready to keep my boundaries firm and unyielding. The following weekend, I planned to change my phone number to prevent further harassment, but before I could act, my ex-husband and his family broke the legal agreement we had established through our lawyers. Around 10 p.m., they showed up uninvited, banging on my door and shouting, "Open up, let us in, we need you, we're family, help us." Their loud voices shattered the calm of the night, showing no consideration for the time or the disturbance they were causing to the neighbors. Instead of confronting them directly, I attempted to reason with them through the intercom, urging them to leave and stop making a scene, but they ignored me and continued to pound on the door, escalating the noise. I was on the verge of calling the police when I heard sirens in the distance. It turned out that a neighbor had already called the authorities. When the police arrived, my ex-husband and his family panicked, mistakenly thinking I had made the call. They tried to flee, but with a crowd of onlookers gathering, there was no escape. The police intervened quickly, escorting them away. I gave the officers a full account of the events, explaining how they had unlawfully trespassed and caused a disturbance. The incident spread like wildfire through the neighborhood, and soon enough, word had reached my ex-husband's workplace, where a coworker had witnessed the scene. Already struggling with financial difficulties due to a salary cut, the public spectacle and police involvement were the final blows to his career. His employer, facing the fallout from his actions, decided to let him go. Without a job and unable to afford his rent, tensions within his family reached a breaking point. The arrangement they had been living under fell apart, and now, my ex-husband, Stephen, and his mother are living in public housing, working multiple part-time jobs just to get by. Even his mother, who once put all her energy into undermining me, is now contributing to their reduced circumstances. Hello, everyone. I'm Kayla, 35, and I want to share a story about an unexpected event and how I quickly navigated through it. Unlike many others, my story starts on a positive note with my mother-in-law, which might surprise some of you. Our relationship had always been filled with kindness, understanding, and mutual respect. My husband, Gary, was my rock, my partner in everything, my best friend. Life felt perfect. This isn't a story about ignoring problems or avoiding red flags. Like any family, we had our small disagreements, but nothing that could have predicted the chaos ahead. What happened left me stunned, confused, and struggling to understand my own reaction. The way I responded, seeking revenge on both Gary and my mother-in-law, still feels hard to explain. Here's the backstory. I had organized a special family vacation. At first, it was just going to be a getaway for Gary and me, but then I thought about Janice, my mother-in-law, who had been widowed for 3 years. I could only imagine how lonely she might be, so I invited her along, wanting to make this trip memorable for all of us. The plan was to explore Italy, Naples, the culture, the food, the Mediterranean sunshine. I was excited about the chance to build memories with the two people I loved most, strengthening our bonds. I handled all the details, the flights, the accommodations, the meals, while Gary and Janice contributed for extra expenses as they saw fit. I was determined to give us all an unforgettable experience. From a charming boutique hotel with panoramic views to attending a flamenco dance show, I had everything mapped out. The excitement was palpable, and I couldn't wait to reveal my surprise. Little did I know, this trip would soon expose cracks in our seemingly flawless family life. Cracks that would test everything I thought I knew about loyalty, trust, and deceit. But let me not get ahead of myself. I want to take you back to that moment, full of anticipation. It was a time when all I could think of was how amazing our trip to Italy was going to be. I stood in our living room, holding the plane tickets, smiling like a kid on Christmas morning. I called Gary and Janice over, eager to see their reactions. They looked at me with puzzled expressions, a mix of curiosity and surprise. "What's going on, Kayla?" Janice asked, her voice a blend of excitement and intrigue. I stepped forward with a flourish, presenting the plane tickets and unveiling the vacation I'd so carefully planned. I watched their faces intently, waiting for a sign that they felt the same joy and gratitude I did. Gary's response was instant. His face lit up, and his eyes gleamed with excitement. "Kayla, this is incredible. You're amazing." Janice's response was more reserved but just as sincere. "Oh, Kayla, this is such a generous gesture. You've really outdone yourself," she said, her warm gaze wrapping around me like a hug. In that moment, I felt a deep sense of pride and fulfillment. Their reactions confirmed everything I'd hoped for. This was a gesture of love, and it was being received just as I'd imagined. I truly believed this trip would bring us closer, creating lifelong memories and strengthening our bond. But, as you may have guessed, our perfect picture didn't last. Beneath the surface of our seemingly idyllic relationships, a tangled web of deceit was waiting to tear it all apart. What I had envisioned as a bonding experience was about to become a test of forgiveness and redefine what family loyalty really meant. As we boarded the plane to Italy, excitement filled the air. We were on our way to experience the beauty of the country, but none of us knew the storm that was quietly brewing. The first week was everything I'd hoped for. We indulged in local delicacies, explored ancient sites, and danced to the rhythm of flamenco under the stars. Laughter and joy filled our days, and everything felt perfect. But, little did I know, a storm was gathering on the horizon, poised to shatter everything I thought I knew about trust. It was a bright Monday morning, with the sun casting a warm glow over the city. I woke up, expecting to share the day with my family, only to find myself alone in a room that should have been filled with the sounds of our laughter. Confusion swept over me as I reached for my phone, trying to contact Gary and Janice, but the calls went unanswered, and the messages were left in silence. They had vanished without a trace, leaving me with a sense of dread and a million unanswered questions. Their phones remained silent, and my search of the room yielded no answers, no goodbye note, no packed bags, not a single hint that they had planned to leave. It felt as if I had imagined all those shared moments, the laughter and warmth that now seemed like shadows. Alone in a room meant for a family, I was left with only unsettling questions, each more troubling than the last. Had they gotten lost, or worse, been taken? But with no sign of struggle, the grim possibilities faded, replaced by an even colder realization: I was abandoned in a foreign country, and the bonds I had trusted so deeply had dissolved without warning. Just as despair began to cloud my thoughts, a glimmer of hope broke through. A call from Janice. Relief mingled with confusion and betrayal as I answered, my voice shaking with concern. "Janice, where are you? What happened?" I asked, my words trembling with a need for reassurance and answers. Her voice, distant and strained, was unrecognizable. "Kayla, I thought I should at least return your call since you were so persistent," she said, her tone icy. This wasn't the warm Janice I knew. This was someone else entirely. Taken aback, I tried to keep calm. "I'm sorry if I bothered you. I was just worried. I couldn't find you or Gary anywhere." Then, she dropped the words that felt like a slap. "We left you." Stunned, I pressed her for an explanation. "Left me? Why? What did I do wrong?" "I couldn't handle another week with you, so we decided to leave," she replied, her tone harsh and unfeeling. Shocked, I managed to stammer, "What do you mean? Did I do something to offend you?" "Yes, Kayla. You insisted on this trip, assuming I'd be thrilled to spend 3 weeks together. I can manage a few hours at family events, but 3 weeks? I've reached my limit," she said with a finality that made my heart sink. "Gary and I are at the airport. We just can't be around you anymore, she added, her words stabbing through the disbelief and hurt that had taken over. My world tilted as I struggled to process her words. How could a bond that felt so strong dissolve so suddenly? Desperate for understanding, I tried to explain my side. Janice, I genuinely had no idea you felt this way. And you wouldn't have, she replied, her voice still cold. I didn't tell you. But why didn't you talk to me? We could have figured this out, I pleaded, trying to grasp at any remaining hope for reconciliation. Amid my shock and sadness, I knew I needed to hear Gary's perspective. Can I talk to Gary? I asked, a mix of hope and dread in my voice. Janice handed him the phone without hesitation, and when Gary spoke, his tone was as indifferent as hers. Hello, he said, sounding strangely detached, as though oblivious to the situation's weight. Gary, you're leaving me too? My voice cracked, the betrayal sharp and raw. I'm leaving because my mom wanted to go home, not because I don't like you, he explained, but the words offered little comfort. How long have you known about your mom's feelings toward me? I asked, trying to find clarity. He admitted he'd known for some time but had hoped the trip might bridge the gap. His admission only deepened my confusion. Why didn't anyone talk to me about this? We're adults, we solve problems through discussion, I pressed, but Gary, like his mother, couldn't provide any real answers. The silence that followed my suggestion of Janice's jealousy seemed to confirm my suspicions. This was less about me and more about her insecurities. Ending the call, I paced my hotel room, bewildered and hurt but also strangely enlightened. I realized that people's issues with you often stem from their internal struggles rather than anything you've done. Jealousy, insecurity, unresolved personal issues, these things can drive people to irrational resentment. The sting of betrayal from those closest to me was something I'd never anticipated. After a few moments of sadness, a spark of resolve took hold. I needed to take control of my situation, to turn this painful experience into a moment of strength. Wiping away my tears, I felt a fierce determination. They would understand that they couldn't just walk all over me without consequences. With hands still shaking, I called Peter, my lifelong friend, who'd been with me through every high and low. I confided in him about the ordeal in Italy, and he offered his support without hesitation. Kayla, you've always been unstoppable, just tell me what you need, and I'm there, he said, his voice a reassuring blend of concern and readiness. An idea began to form, something both symbolic and satisfying. Peter, your construction company still has a ton of that leftover sawdust, right? Yeah, it's a constant hassle, he replied, sounding intrigued. I've got the perfect use for it, I said, outlining my plan to fill Janice's house with sawdust, a messy reminder of the damage she'd inflicted. Amused and impressed, Peter was immediately on board. But how are we getting inside before they get back? He asked, his curiosity piqued. There's a spare key under the potted plant on the patio, that's our way in, I said, every detail accounted for. You've thought of everything, I'm impressed, he laughed, admiration clear in his voice. Determined not to be overlooked or mistreated again, I fully embraced my new resolve. As the plan came to life and Peter confirmed its execution, I eagerly awaited the fallout, not just for the sake of revenge but as a message that I wasn't someone to dismiss lightly. Then, right on cue, my phone buzzed with a message from Peter. The deed was done. Now, it was only a matter of time before Gary and Janice would encounter the result of my response. This wasn't just a prank, it was a lesson in respect and in understanding the consequences of underestimating someone's strength. I opened the pictures Peter had sent, unable to suppress a grin. Janice's meticulously kept home was now an incredible sight, buried under a blanket of sawdust. It was as if a sandstorm had overtaken each corner, a layer of chaos marking our handiwork. Laughing over the phone with Peter, I felt an odd sense of liberation from the weight of their betrayal. It was strange and satisfying, sharing this small victory with a friend who had stood by me in the face of such hurt. There's a certain satisfaction in a bit of mischief, Peter chuckled, and I couldn't have agreed more. As the hours passed, my anticipation for Gary and Janice's reaction only grew. I could picture their stunned faces upon returning to the transformed home. Eventually, Gary's call came, his voice filled with panic and disbelief as he described their shock at the sawdust-filled house. I couldn't help but feel a sense of justice. My heart beat with the satisfaction that my message had landed. Actions have consequences. Kayla, it's awful, Mom is beside herself. Gary sounded frantic. I didn't hesitate to own my part. Serves you right, you left me stranded. Did you think there wouldn't be any consequences? I replied calmly. Wait, was this you? He stammered, caught off guard. Then I heard Janice's voice sharply cut in, demanding the phone before accusing me outright. Rather than confirm or deny, I suggested they might want to review their home security measures. Her complaints about the discomfort and inconvenience of the sawdust only made the irony all the sweeter, given their choice to leave me abandoned. In that moment, I felt empowered. I had reclaimed my sense of self, showing that I wasn't someone to be discarded or disrespected without a second thought. Our orchestrated chaos delivered the message loud and clear. As I pondered when I'd return from my vacation, the idea of staying longer became more tempting. When I spoke to Janice and Gary again, as she lamented her home state, Gary was practically begging for answers. "Kayla, how could you?" he asked, distressed. "Oh, you think I had something to do with this?" I feigned innocence. "I'm just here enjoying the jacuzzi, not sure how I'd pull off anything from here." Suppressing my laughter as they fumbled to pin any evidence on me was priceless. The thrill of leaving them bewildered was undeniable. As I ended the call, a deep sense of satisfaction settled over me. I had flipped the script and left them to deal with the fallout of their own actions. Though I knew it was a bold move, I was certain they'd find other living arrangements rather than stay in a house filled with sawdust. Meanwhile, I continued to savor my Italian escape, relishing the freedom I'd reclaimed. This experience taught me a valuable lesson. Some people only understand the impact of their actions when they face real consequences. And if life ever gives you the chance to serve justice in your own unique way, maybe it's worth taking. Sometimes, the best lesson is one that's unmistakably felt. When Terry accused me of infidelity during a business trip and demanded a divorce, his voice thundered through the phone, but instead of feeling shaken, I felt nothing but calm. His explosive rants were nothing new to me, just another of his overdramatic outbursts. Even as I could almost feel his fury vibrating across the line, I stood my ground, unfazed. His belief that I would fall for his emotional manipulation was almost laughable. As his baseless accusations collided with my firm resolve, I couldn't help but oscillate between mild irritation and a sense of amusement. But somewhere in the middle of it all, something shifted. This wasn't just a petty argument, it felt like a turning point for me. Internally, I couldn't suppress a smirk at his futile attempt to control the situation. Then, in a moment of clarity, it hit me, it was my turn to take charge. I'm Megan, 30, and I've worked at the same college bookstore since I graduated from junior college at 21. Terry, 3 years older, has never had the same career stability. When we first met 2 years ago, he was constantly job hopping or unemployed. His proposal came quickly, but I had one condition: he needed to secure a stable job first. I was determined not to marry without ensuring our financial future. "There's a condition," I said firmly, noticing the anxiety in his eyes. "You need to get a stable job. Marriage can't be the next step until we've got our financial future sorted." He shrugged it off, trying to sound casual. "Don't worry, you're working, so there's no rush, right?" "But my parents would never approve of me marrying without a stable job," I explained. He finally agreed to get serious about his job search. Within weeks, he found an office role at a construction company, and we moved forward with our wedding plans. I thought of him as reckless with his finances, but I believed we could balance each other out. I'd help him be more responsible, and he'd encourage me to loosen up. But, as it often happens, the real challenges were only just beginning. About a year into our marriage, as we started looking for a house, Terry casually dropped a bombshell. "I might not qualify for a mortgage," he said one evening, as if it were no big deal. I froze. "What do you mean?" He explained, almost nonchalantly. "Since I haven't been at my job long, I might need a guarantor. My dad could help, but he's got his own financial issues with gambling." "Why didn't you tell me this sooner?" I asked, stunned, especially as we were already sitting at the table with a contract and the real estate agent beside us. Terry, ever calm, suggested, "If we put the house in your name, the mortgage should be fine. You've been at your job forever, so it's just a technicality. We'll both pay the mortgage." "But that's not the point," I snapped, frustration bubbling over. "Why didn't you bring this up earlier? This affects both of us, and I'm not even ready with the paperwork." He apologized, but his regret seemed hollow. His words lacked any real weight, and though I wanted to press the issue, the situation had already moved beyond our control. The contract was on the table, the real estate agent waiting for an answer. Despite my frustration, I chose to bite my tongue, for now. Reluctantly, I scrambled to gather the documents for the loan application, my income statement, the bank statements, everything I needed. In a moment of impulsive decision-making, I agreed to finalize the purchase of the house under my name. Doubts crept in almost immediately. Could I really see a future with Terry? Perhaps I should have drawn a line in the sand and refused to move forward, but instead, I was caught up in the urgency of it all, feeling the weight of my decisions grow heavier, especially with the added complication of my father-in-law's financial troubles. Just the other day, I was talking to Dad. Terry said one evening, his voice casual, "He might lose his house because of those debts I told you about, so he's thinking about moving in with us. Is that okay with you?" The words hit me like a ton of bricks. Why would you even consider that without discussing it with me first? I shot back, my frustration rising. Terry shrugged as if the answer was simple. Well, he's in trouble, and my brother's working abroad, so I'm the only one who can help. Maybe we could let him stay for a while, just until he gets things sorted. Temporary? I can understand that, but permanent? That's a huge decision, I replied, my voice tight with frustration. Terry's frown deepened. You just don't want him to stay, do you? We could split the living expenses if he moves in. I couldn't hold back my sharp response. You're always talking about money, the money you never seem to contribute. You promised we'd split the mortgage, but I'm the only one paying. I'm the one who's been shouldering all of it. In a marriage, finances are meant to be shared. It's not just my money, it's supposed to be ours, but it's only coming out of my account because the house is in my name. You're being incredibly self-centered, he muttered, his voice dripping with frustration. I could feel my own temper rise. Self-centered? You're the one avoiding responsibility. Before I could say anything more, Terry muttered something about hating discussions about money and stormed out of the room. This wasn't the first time we had a blow-up like this, and I knew it wouldn't be the last. He never took my concerns seriously, and we were always left with the same unresolved tensions hanging between us. Even though we were in constant conflict, Terry didn't entirely ignore his family's situation. As part of his work in construction site administration, he was often involved in dealing with real estate contracts. He'd started seeking advice from an agency on how to sell his family's home. Though I was never really part of those discussions, I overheard bits and pieces of his talks, and while it felt like a reminder of everything that was wrong, I took some comfort in knowing he was at least taking action. Still, the idea of my in-laws moving in with us after the sale of their house loomed like a shadow over everything. Terry began meeting with real estate agents, bringing his parents along, but leaving me out of the process entirely. His weekends were consumed with trips and meetings, and soon enough, he left for an extended business trip to oversee a construction project far away. At the time, I couldn't fully grasp it, but looking back, I realized those were the first signs of the growing power struggle between us. A few days after Terry left, I decided to take a breather and treat myself to some shopping and a quiet cup of tea at the cafe. As I walked in, I was greeted by a familiar face, Bruce, a young employee from the real estate company Terry had been consulting. Terry had mentioned Bruce was still fairly new to the company, having only been there for less than a year. "Ah, yes, I remember you," I said with a smile. "You stopped by our house before, didn't you?" "Yes, sorry about that," Bruce said, his voice sincere. "I didn't mean to drop by unannounced, and I ended up staying for a meal. I feel bad about that." "No need to apologize," I said with a smile. "I should have been more welcoming." We ended up sitting down for tea together. Bruce was friendly, more grounded than Terry, and we quickly found common ground in our conversation. What began as a casual exchange soon turned into a pleasant chat, and by the time we parted ways, I felt like I had made a small connection. I never imagined that a simple meeting for tea would later become the foundation for a devastating accusation, but when Terry returned, his anger flared, and he confronted me, his words cold and accusing. "You've been cheating on me." While I was away, Terry dropped the bombshell, his words crashing down on me without warning. "Haven't you? We're getting a divorce. Give the house to my parents and leave immediately." It hit me like a punch to the gut, leaving me stunned and disoriented. My mind raced as I tried to process it, wondering if the rumors I'd been hearing were true, rumors Terry had been spreading, claiming I was unfaithful, all to justify his decision to divorce me. The man he'd accused me of having an affair with was Bruce, the very person I'd met for a harmless tea, the one Terry had wrongfully insinuated I was involved with. The next day, Bruce showed up at my door, his expression apologetic. "I'm sorry for dropping by like this," Bruce said hesitantly. "Terry asked me to reach out to you." Confused and desperate for answers, I invited him in, eager to understand what was really going on. What Bruce revealed next left me breathless. Terry had orchestrated an elaborate scheme to accuse me of infidelity and set the stage for our divorce. Bruce, though unwillingly pulled into the plot, was tasked with helping Terry fabricate evidence to make the story believable. The reasoning behind Terry's betrayal was twofold. First, he was panicking about the possibility of losing his parents' home due to their financial struggles. Terry saw moving in with them as an easy solution, but my refusal to go along with it pushed him to concoct a plan to get rid of me and claim the house for himself. Secondly, Terry had been carrying on an affair of his own. While I thought he was working on resolving family issues, he was actually spending his weekends with his mistress. His growing infatuation with her had turned me, his wife, into an obstacle he needed to remove. By framing me as unfaithful, he believed he could both get rid of me and secure the house. I had always underestimated Terry's cunning, but the depth of his deceit stunned me. I felt a mix of disgust and disbelief as Bruce apologized for his part in the scheme, but I wasn't about to let Terry get away with it. I feigned compliance, all while silently plotting my next move. With Bruce's insider knowledge of real estate, he suggested a few tactics to turn the tables. Finally, he proposed a bold plan: sell the house while Terry was away. When Terry returned, unaware of what had transpired, I'd confront him with the truth. And that's exactly what I did. "I know everything, Terry," I began, my voice steady, savoring the look of shock on his face. "Bruce recorded all your schemes, everything, including your plan to frame me for cheating. If this divorce goes through, I can take you to court for alimony." He stammered, caught completely off guard. "Why?" he muttered, unable to process the gravity of the situation. But I wasn't done yet. "You didn't realize this, but Bruce isn't just some employee. He's the son of the company's CEO, I continued, watching his face twist in confusion. "Didn't you notice? Bruce shares the same last name as the CEO." Terry's lack of awareness was almost too much to bear. "Are you serious right now?" I said, incredulous. "How did you not see that?" His disbelief was palpable. "Well, Bruce's last name isn't exactly rare." "Are you for real?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Terry hesitated, his mind slowly processing the magnitude of his mistake. It began to sink in that Bruce's involvement meant the company that handled a large portion of his family's real estate deals was now privy to his deception. If the CEO found out, Terry would be in deep trouble. In fact, Bruce had likely already informed his father of everything. Terry's tone shifted as he realized the precariousness of his situation. "Fine, I'll check it out, but if you're lying, I'll find out," he muttered, his voice strained, before slamming the phone down. The fallout came quickly. The real estate company, owned by Bruce's father, severed all business ties with Terry. No more advice, no more dealings with his family's property. The damage was done. With the house already sold, Terry was left with no choice but to return to his parents' home after his business trip. Meanwhile, Bruce had helped me find a modest apartment, easing my transition as I began the painful process of filing for divorce. Despite everything, Terry continued to reach out, his voice desperate over the phone. "I'm sorry, Megan, please, forgive me," he begged, his words dripping with regret. I wasn't moved. "It's too late for apologies," I replied coldly. "You tried to manipulate me, using someone else to do your dirty work. Why should I believe anything you say now?" "Don't say that," he protested, shifting the blame. "After the divorce, you can be with that other woman, right? That's what you wanted, isn't it?" I was done. "Yeah, she had someone else, and she dumped me." "What a sad story," I said, the bitterness seeping into my voice. "But don't expect me to change my mind and come running back to you just because of that." I ended the call with a weary sigh, my resolve stronger than ever. Terry wasn't easily deterred, though. Despite my best efforts to keep my new address hidden, his calls never stopped. Each time, his pleas were the same: "Please don't leave me. I'll change. I'll be a better husband." But I was tired of hearing empty promises. Once the divorce was finalized, I was going to block him everywhere, delete his number, block him on WhatsApp, and sever all ties completely. But even that wasn't the end. My mother-in-law called, her voice tinged with desperation. "Please, Megan, we're lost without you. It's not just about the house, is it?" I snapped. "There's no house left, remember?" I reminded her, frustration building. "And we're not heartless. You'll understand when you see it." She tried to twist the conversation. "You wanted the money, didn't you?" I didn't hold back. "That's not true, and you know it. You tried to manipulate me into living with you, and I won't fall for it." Her attempts to reason with me fell flat, and I refused to listen. Their motives were too clear, and I wasn't going to let them draw me back into their web of manipulation. When my refusal to comply persisted, Terry resorted to more deception to gain an edge in the divorce. He wasn't someone I could trust, not now, not ever. I made it clear that his financial motivations were transparent and that I would not be swayed. But the pressure didn't stop. My father-in-law, in a fit of condescension, tried to guilt me into helping more. He accused me of neglecting my duties as a daughter-in-law, claiming I was abandoning his wife during her time of need. He even implied that my refusal was due to some supposed debt I owed. I stood firm, unwavering in my decision. His reaction, however, escalated quickly. His voice grew louder and more venomous, accusing me of cruelty and blaming my issues on my mother-in-law. He threatened me, calling me a wicked woman, and vowed I'd regret my decisions. When the call ended, I was shaken but resolute. I saved the recording of his threats and brought it to my lawyer. As it turned out, his words were legally considered threats. Armed with this evidence, I confronted Terry, warning him that I was prepared to take legal action if he didn't agree to the divorce terms. Reluctantly, he finally gave in. That was my final liberation from the clutches of his family. The divorce was finalized, and Terry's professional life began to crumble. His colleagues grew wary of him, and his responsibilities at work dwindled. His family's financial troubles caught up with him, and he was forced to sell their home for far less than its value. He now lives in a small apartment with his parents, struggling with a reduced income and the pressure of supporting them. To top it off, he's required to pay me alimony. I found out the full extent of Terry's downfall through Bruce, who had remained a trusted friend. Bruce, who had recently moved to the HR department of a real estate firm, suggested I apply for a job there, leveraging my customer service experience. After considering the opportunity, I decided to take the plunge and join the company. As I transitioned into this new phase of my life, Bruce and I grew closer, our friendship turned into something more, and after a year of dating, we decided to get married. It was a surprising turn of events, but one that felt right. Bruce eventually became the president of the company, and I was proud to stand by his side. Looking back, I couldn't help but reflect on the irony of it all. Terry, who had once falsely accused us of infidelity, was now witnessing Bruce and me build a life together. With the support of my new family, including my in-laws, I finally felt at peace. Bruce and I looked forward to creating a future filled with love, support, and the happiness I had long been denied.